The easiest of Rockas.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, man.
I,
So, before we talk about End of Dragon stuff, well, first off, stream say hi to Rocka. Rocka say hi to the stream.
yeah, I was actually just like checking your stream and waiting through an ad to see if we're like already live, but I figured we would be, right? So I wasn't sure what to say,
Yeah.
but yeah, so glad to be here again, dude. What's up?
Hey, man. I Rocka, you and I have been talking offline like here and there ever since the podcast we did last year, which was amazing. Um,
Yeah.
and you gave me an idea for a topic tonight, which I sorely needed because I didn't have anything prepared. Which is to talk
Well,
about some of the very interesting factors around Guild Wars 2's third expansion's upcoming release, speculated to be happening later this year. Actually, don't we know it's coming in 2021?
well, it's not really confirmed, but it's heavily speculated, I would say.
Okay.
I don't think it's confirmed. I think there's been like an Easter egg in the initial teaser trailer they did
Uh,
that there's like a little, I don't know, somebody like zoomed in and found that like in Roman letters there's a 2021 written on the
oh my
bridge or something.
god, you can't trust
Um,
that. That's ridiculous.
and I think it's just like generally kind of the assumption. And like I mean, people of course they look at what are their release cycles right now, what makes sense, sort of, right? They're
Yeah,
looking at the upcoming announcements, events, and of course the main indicator right now that people are looking at is the currently ongoing event where they give you where they unlock you old Living World seasons on a weekly basis. So they like kind of give you old content that if you haven't played at the time, you don't have unlocked.
right.
Um, and yeah, they give you that on like a weekly basis. So people kind of speculate, okay, if they continue on a weekly kind of basis to give us one episode each 1 or 2 weeks, they're going to be done by this and this time, and that's probably the earliest time for a launch, right?
Yeah. So
So you
this is
take that info, yeah, and exactly, and then you speculate based on that,
yeah.
basically.
Yeah, can we talk about this old content re-release stuff for a second? So I think we've
Yeah,
gotten the first 4 episodes of season 2 to date. Have you actually gone through and done any of the replaying of that stuff?
a little bit with friends. I'm not the biggest fan of all the story replay achievements and stuff. A
Uh-huh.
lot of it when you've played it once, for me personally, and other play. I've seen other players love it, right? But I personally, it drags on a little bit. It's a little bit slow. You kind of have to wait for the NPCs to walk a lot. And I play a lot of
Yeah.
other games, right? And I work as well, and I'm sort of busy if I feel like
Rock is a
something
busy
doesn't engage
man.
me. Yeah, yes, very much, yeah.
Yeah,
But
word.
like when I play a game and it doesn't kind of engage me much, and I feel like I have to sit through something, then even if because the reward is really good, right? You
Right,
essentially
it's
get a,
a
I think, a legendary trinket at the end, right?
that's the
If you do
that's
it all.
that's the thought, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and like even though that is a very interesting and appealing reward to me, it's not really, you know, it's still not really worth the time. It's just like I have like maybe 3 nights a week where I'm not already raiding in another game or something that I kind of like
Right.
just chill and
No, and
when I notice that
exactly
this is boring me, and yeah,
exactly what you're saying is exactly my read on it is it's not really to persuade people to not who are already doing other stuff to come play Guild Wars. It's more to persuade people who are already looking for reasons to play Guild Wars to keep doing it and to stay excited.
yes,
Right?
absolutely. It's a
Yeah.
retention measure, basically, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's of course, it's also, and the thing is, I think it would have made sense to make this an not just a measure to retain existing players, but also to draw new players in, because it's like
Hmm.
because it's aimed at players who haven't played at those times, right? So
Hmm.
it would make sense for new players to have the same benefit, right? And
Yeah. You know what I
it's
found
just
myself
like,
thinking would be really cool? Like, I think I went through and did like the first 3 or 4 episodes. No, the first three, I guess. And then I just kind of like, okay, like this is not like I got the same feeling you did. That it's not the
yeah,
best use of my time, really. Because I've been through it all before, like you. And I kept thinking, what would make this more interesting? And I thought, like, well, it would be really cool. And I know this would take actual development time. So, What would be really
Yeah.
cool is if there was
Oh,
some kind of like mystery related to End of Dragons having to do with like affecting the timeline or something. You would actually see
oh,
pop up like temporal anomalies or
oh,
something, and
okay.
you could have somehow as like events in the world. You know, like there have been events like this in the past in Guild Wars,
Oh,
but
that would have
then
been
but then
amazing. You're
have them
right. Yeah.
actually pop up inside the story instances.
Like the
Um,
occasional detail to keep an eye out for,
yeah,
sort of like, and that would
A-
be awesome.
yeah, and
Oh
have it
yeah,
like
dude. I
only
love that
pop up
idea.
like the second time you go through it or whatever. I don't know, but like that I think would be a lot more fun because it would create a cool community buzz around the mystery that would get people excited, and people from outside the game would be able to look at it and
Oh
say, "Oh,
yeah.
there's something exciting going on that's building hype for the End of Dragons." But as it is, it's just like check the boxes to get cool new loot. It's if it doesn't float your boat, it's a little less interesting, right?
Yeah, I think this is like you're talking about a great aspect here, like this community solving a mystery thing. I think that's
Yeah.
absolutely something that creates so much buzz, right? Like sometimes it's really, it actually happened kind of recently in Guild Wars 1. I think like
Hmm.
an ex-Guild Wars 1 dev tweeted that there was apparently one skin that had never been found in the game,
Right.
and
I
and
remember
the
seeing that.
entire community started rallying together and like searching for this one particular skin, and it was
Uh,
so cool. Like, and all it takes is just like, it doesn't even have to be big, right? It can be tiny little
mhm.
additions, and just the info that this exists, and you can definitely like create a great community reaction.
Yeah. Yeah, man. As I was playing through those episodes, that's what I wished for them to be doing. You play
That would have
through
been
it,
fantastic.
and then you check Reddit to
Absolutely.
see what people's speculation is, and then it creates wooden potatoes videos, which we all need.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Oh, I
which we
always love
desperately
those.
need.
I love those like mystery videos, like here's like some part of the game that hasn't been explored yet, or it's like kind of mysterious. The Wizard's Tower,
Yeah.
that thing that's always been there, and everybody
Yes.
wants to know what's in there, but
Yeah. Um,
you'll never find out.
my favorite of his is still, and just because it was fucking right, was when he guessed the name of Mordremoth based on clues from in game. The
Oh,
jungle
really?
dragon, like he figured it out. Um, I thought that was so impressive. But
Right?
anyway,
I love that stuff. I
me
definitely
too.
remember one of the first things I think when I started playing Guild Wars 2 again that got me really interested was actually his video on the Wizard's Tower. That's
Mm,
one of my earliest Guild Wars 2 content
yeah,
memories,
yeah.
I think.
The Wizard's Tower.
But yeah,
Maybe.
I think that's a beautiful idea. That's a fantastic idea.
Yeah.
Now I feel
Anyway,
even worse about it, man.
right,
Now
right.
that's all I've gonna be thinking about. But I mean, the way that I've been playing it, when I've been playing it, is I actually played a little bit today.
Hmm.
Like, I played with a friend, right? Like I go in with a friend that I wanted to catch up with for a while, and we just, we chill, we talk. It's kind of like easy background content.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
just play through it together.
Just
It's
relaxing.
kind of good for that, but it's yeah. I may as well watch Netflix in a way, right? But I prefer to do it with a friend and use that time to kind of catch
Yeah,
up
it's
now.
the game as a platform where the
Yeah.
content is the connection, not the game itself. Nothing
And
wrong with that.
there's a part about that argument that I actually hate, right?
Oh,
I
go for
actually
it.
I actually really,
Lay it
because
on
like a
me.
lot of people use this. Oh yeah. Okay, well a lot of people kind of use this to kind of like defend games that don't perform well in terms of content, right?
Oh,
I've
okay.
Um, well, a lot of people will kind of use this argument like,
Fun.
well, an MMO is fun because of the people you play with,
Right.
and there's just something about that kind of irks me. I just feel like that's not really true because
Uh,
every thing you do, you can do with a friend and will be more fun. I could
yeah.
go on a walk outside with a friend, and that walk itself maybe wouldn't be what's fun about it. It would be my interaction with my friend, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
so it doesn't matter if I do this in Guild Wars 2. It doesn't matter if I do this in Final Fantasy, World of Warcraft. It doesn't matter if I play Minesweeper, right, while talking to that friend.
Mhm.
The game at that point isn't. You're not even like acknowledging it as a game anymore, right? Um, like it's
Yeah. Saying.
important for an
Mhm.
MMO, right, to be a platform for the players to talk to, but it's not all it is, right? It's not. That's not the ultimate defense for an MMORPG. Like, well, you just need to play it with friends.
Right.
That's a that's too easy a defense. That's like a universal statement. Everything is more fun with a friend.
Yeah. You need it, but it's not good enough. Right.
Yeah. Like it's still like what makes me playing what I consider to maybe like, and just this is potential. This is not talking about living world now. I'm just
Mhm.
like talking in potentials here. The what if scenario. If I was playing with a friend, would I rather play with a friend in a very engaging game that we both enjoy, or would I rather play in a game that where we both kind of dislike what we're doing and we're just, we're just grinding through it because we have each other to talk to, right?
Right.
Like that, because that's what you're comparing to at that point, right? It's like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. The thing I always go back to is like, the being a kid in the late '90s, um, hanging out and having my friends over after school and playing console games around the TV in my basement in my family's house, and just chill out and talking. And a lot of that talk was born of the reality of that time, which is no longer valid, which is that there weren't as many games to play. Like maybe
yeah,
you
yeah.
had to stretch one or two games for the whole year when you're in that situation, and you make the best of it with your friends. But
Yeah,
in
you want to limit on
2021,
what you had,
there's
right?
so much
Like, I mean,
competition.
nowadays you have so much to choose from, right?
Yeah,
And I mean, you're actually bringing up a great buzzword here about the topic that we initially wanted to talk about, right? Which is basically competition, right? Uh,
yeah,
I'm throwing you the ball here, right, for the great transition right there.
yeah.
And
Fine,
just
definitely.
to
So
kind of finish that thought, though, right? Like it's
yeah,
like it's just more fun to play the game that everybody wants to play, right? Than
hmm
so when you have that choice, I naturally think it's kind of it's kind of a weak defense to then say no, we play the weak game because we still have fun together. Because you could have that same fun together plus the fun of a game that you'd enjoy more, right?
hmm yeah,
Um,
yeah. And what ends up being the ultimate endorsement for that experience is the game that has the most people playing it, because then you're most likely to be able to connect to the people you care about,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or
And
or,
you can
or
make great friends in niche games, right? Like I think a lot of people, I think actually the smaller MMO gets, right, the homelier often a community also is.
yeah,
Like so you can definitely make great friends in every MMO, right? I just don't think it's the be all end all excuse for all. Like, no, this game is great. It doesn't matter that it doesn't get content. It doesn't matter that maybe this stuff wasn't well received or something, right? All of
hmm
that doesn't matter because you should just be focusing on having friends, right?
right,
That is the bottom line often that really, yeah, that I just don't like when people kind of argue that direction. I feel like that's
yeah. I mean,
a wrong
it's one of those
direction.
points that you can't disagree with, but it's
Yeah.
also not very strong because again, the counter
It has a
argument is
spark
exactly what
of
you're saying.
truth. It has a
Yes,
spark of truth, but it's being exaggerated to a point where it doesn't apply anymore.
yeah, yeah. So like you can literally have fun with friends playing tic tac toe, which is the most boring solved game in the whole wide world.
Don't you talk about my favorite game like that.
Tic tac toe and Master Roca.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You
So
know what
yeah,
game I used to be surprisingly good at back in the day?
what?
Do you know what is it called? 4 in a row or something? Like
Oh, the one where you drop the little
four
the
wins
pucks
or
in?
something? Yeah, 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 yeah.
Connect
Like
Four.
I don't. What is it?
Connect Four.
Connect Four. Yeah. Oh, dude,
Yeah.
I used to destroy at that game. Like I that used to be like if a thing that I do like meeting with friends, like I'd always be like, dude, let's play one more round of Connect Four, and like I just, and this is not me, like I'm not talking about 8-year-old me, I'm talking about like 17-year-old me at like parties and shit, right? I was one of the cool
All
kids,
right,
it's safe to
bro.
say, I think, right?
I brought my Connect Four. Let's
Yeah,
rock and
dude.
roll. And let's get it on.
We had, I mean, we did a lot of like we had like a very close knit group of friends, right? We'd like spend all the weekends together at somebody's house usually, or
Mhm.
somebody's, So it would always be like five buddies or something, chilling and yeah, yeah, and really often I try, and people wouldn't want to play against me because I'd usually win. It was fun. It was a good
You were
time.
that kid. You were the kid who
Yes,
brought the game you could beat
I
everyone. You know.
I discovered my one niche ability and I banked on it. Okay,
There you
like
go. That
yeah,
reminds me of
but
like,
that's what life is all about. Like you've got to figure out what you're good at, and you've got to capitalize. Right?
yeah, use it to crush your friends. Definitely.
Yeah, it's exactly.
I had that same experience doing LAN parties around the same age when I was
Oh
graduating high
right, yeah,
school,
yeah, yeah. I mean,
where
it's
I
similar up here, right? Of course, you want to play the one game you're like best at, right?
Yeah,
Like,
you're secretly a god at who's been playing it for thousands of hours
yeah, yeah,
competitively, and then this game be fun to try. What do you guys think?
yeah. Yeah. It's like whenever, like we were playing, like I think we were mostly playing Battlefield 2, I think, back in the
Okay.
day, and Counter Strike 1.6, right?
Hmm.
And I'd be pretty bad at Battlefield 2. And I wasn't great at 1.6 either, so I'd be like the guy who was advertising for, hey guys, let's try the gun game mod. How about gun games? What do you think? I don't know if you're familiar. There was like a mod where you'd start with a pistol, and every time you get a kill, like you work yourself one gun
Oh,
up. So like,
I've heard of this game. Yeah.
so like I didn't want to go for like the serious try hard games. I'd
Mm-hmm.
rather want to go for like the bit of a fun mode
Mm-hmm.
where it was more excusable for me to lose at.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because you could always just say, "Oh, well, I just didn't get the early upgrades, right? You guys killed me one early, and then I couldn't catch up, right? It snowballed."
Yeah, you just fuzz the results. Plausible deniability. Well, hey,
Those
speaking
were
of
good
plausible
days, man.
deniabilities, dude, like I was talking to DeRayer about this, like the good days, the good old days, and the old crew. Like, they're part of the reason they're so good is you just can't have them anymore. You know, it's
True. Yeah, I mean, a lot
beautiful
of
and
it is
sad.
nostalgia.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
those days came with their own problems. I mean, I think what made it fun was just like the interaction and the fact what an event it used to be.
Hmm.
Like, like it would be like, oh, dude, I have my parents are on a vacation or something, or my grandma's house is empty. Like, let's have a LAN party.
Yeah.
That was like this crazy all weekend event where you'd eat, I don't know, pizza and junk food.
Oh,
And
LAN parties. Do those happen
it was,
anymore?
yeah,
I,
not
I
as much. I
guess you
mean,
don't need
I know,
them.
like, I have a little brother that's like a fair bit younger than me, right?
Uh
So,
huh.
and he never did them the same way. I think that's when games like maybe League of Legends took over a bit. I think the format changed a little bit when
Mm-hmm.
you kind of stopped doing LAN parties where you'd play on the LAN connection to each other, right? So you'd play on like your own internal network.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, people just kind of go to one place, bring your computer. You still have the meetup factor, but you don't actually connect via the LAN port. You actually just you're all connected to the
Yeah,
internet, and you
you're
just
using
play
the
online
internet,
games together.
right? Because all
Yeah,
modern games have matchmaking and
exactly.
a whole
Every game at this
infrastructure you
point
have to
is
connect
online,
to.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I think that's kind of what kind of probably replaced that a bit, but I don't know how big of a trend it is anymore.
I don't know. I don't know. Like on the one hand, part of me is like, "Oh, LAN parties are so fun," and then I think about actually doing one. Like, "Oh man, what a pain in the ass." I guess
Yeah,
that's the
all the
gift of
setting
youth.
up, man.
That's the gift of
Oh,
youth.
I
Is
remember.
you have
And
all
that
the
was
time in the
always,
world and the idea, the romantic idea.
yeah, yeah. And then
Yeah.
when you get older, right, you don't really find, I couldn't spend an entire weekend like that anymore
Yeah.
today.
Can you
Like, I
imagine?
have too much, I have too much stuff to do. Like, when am I going to do my laundry? Like,
Yeah, like I
it's,
can barely even like spend a whole evening gaming anymore. I'm pulled too many
yeah,
different ways, and part of me regrets
exactly.
that, but also
Other
part of me
things.
loves that because actually being this busy is the happiest I've ever felt, like the most satisfied I've ever
Absolutely.
been. You
I
know?
100% agree with that so strongly, actually, because I had a phase where I was unemployed for a while, and all I kind of had to do was like I sent out applications, and
Hmm.
then I just kind of had a lot of free time, right? And so I played a lot of video games, and that was not fulfilling at all. And it
Yeah.
didn't feel, I didn't feel any happier. I actually think that I was much more unhappy with everything. Like, um, so like spending less time and spending it more on the things that you actually want to do, in a
Hmm.
way, is such a much better way to play a game.
Yeah.
As you described, right? Even when it means that like you find yourself playing content like this Living Vault release that you just don't enjoy redoing again, right? That you've had your experience in, and
Right.
now you'd rather spend your time otherwise, right? Like it makes you rethink how you spend your time, and you end up spending it in a more meaningful way.
Yeah.
And it makes you go to bed with a feeling that you didn't waste your day. So,
Right. Right. You know, this is totally tangential to anything we sat down to talk about, but do
true,
you
yeah.
do,
We're getting sidetracked.
do you keep tabs on Asmongold at all?
I've been watching his stuff a bit recently, yeah, mostly because of like the Final Fantasy things going on, and because of
Yeah,
he's a bit
there's
of
a segue.
yeah. Well, there you go, yeah, but that's the second segue we're gonna be ignoring now, but because
We'll wait till
because
we get
I'm
to 3.
uh yeah. We're getting so sidetracked. Oh my god! But yeah, I watch a lot of his stuff. It's not like I follow him especially. It's more that I think he voices a lot of general MMO concerns,
Yeah.
and so when you talk about recent MMO news, in a way, then you're talking like New World adding a cash shop, right, and the whole
Hmm.
MTX debate that followed that. We're talking about TBC adding cash stores elements, right? Um, and his channel just talks about that a lot, right? And the most recent news I think was a big article that's now all over YouTube. And if you're following the MMOs, it's all over the place. Some website made an article that declared Final Fantasy the most played game at
Yeah,
the
I saw that.
moment.
I saw
Like,
that.
yeah, basically a
Based on
big
some
headline: Final
numbers.
Fantasy overtakes WoW, and then it like in the first sentence it like qualifies in the
Yeah.
article, like, by the way, this treats WoW and vanilla WoW as separate games, so
Right, which
it's
makes no
already a bit
sense.
wishy-washy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so but like it's a good headline, of course, right? And
It's a fantastic headline, and it capitalizes on a popular sentiment among that
absolutely.
among a certain segment of players who really cares about the opinions of Asmongold's and people in that space.
And there's just currently, I think WoW is just currently in a bit of a split point, right? And a bit of a cross point, like
Yeah,
cross path. Sorry, my
Crossroads.
language barrier. Crossroads. There we go.
Mm,
Because a lot of players are just like very frustrated with World of Warcraft and have been for a long time,
hmm
and are just kind of, um, yeah, just kind of fed up with kind of the bullshit, I would say, that they kind of make their players um deal with, or like put up with all the time. And
Okay.
now they kind of have like this alternative, right? A lot of it's I think it's like kind of for the first time that a lot of big content creators in the World of Warcraft scene actually do go towards Final Fantasy and say that this is fun,
Yeah.
and they actually like playing it.
What do you think it is
I
about
think the
Final?
most
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say most popular people recently probably being Preach and Belula, who have been.
Oh, it's Preach going too.
Um,
I didn't know about that.
Well, Preach made videos where he like watches Final Fantasy content and he's like, "Can I figure out what they're doing?" But it
Yeah.
all very much looks like he's eyeing the game, and
Hmm.
there's I don't know. Do you know like what's his name, Maximus or Maximum?
Oh,
I
the
think
the limit
Limit.
guy. I love his stuff.
Yeah,
He's so
yeah. He's
delightful.
been watching. He was actually in my stream once. Like I
Oh, for
remember
real.
I was streaming an Ultimate, and people sent me screenshots after the screen of like his name and my viewer list. I mean, he didn't talk in chat, all right. He probably doesn't remember who I am. He was just watching a random guy doing an Ultimate and Final Fantasy.
That's still a
But
cool moment, though.
and everybody just sent me those screenshots. But he's been talking on Twitter to some other content creators.
Hmm
He seems to know, like he seems to have been watching a lot of Final Fantasy actually.
hmm
Like he's been interacting with I don't know if these names tell you anything, right? But like Arthas and Llama Todd, who are content creators over there,
Llama
who
Todd, I
are
know
focusing on
through
raids.
Xandria.
Oh, there you go. He's a great
Yeah.
guy. Both of them are great. Both of them
Yeah.
are great content creators. Um,
Okay.
but yeah. So that just kind of that kind of obviously puts a lot of focus on Asmon, right? To come
hmm
back to your question, was he is, of course, just recently, just a few days ago, he tweeted that he will play Final Fantasy
I
14,
saw
and then, of
that.
course, it's everybody going up in arms. Everybody's like,
Yeah.
I'm getting a few, how when Summit tried Guild Wars 2, everybody was super hyped, but then there's also like this lingering danger. What if that person just absolutely hates it, and it just turns into like a shit show, you know?
What if someone I like
And
doesn't like what I like? God forbid.
there's a good chance that he won't like it, right? Because
Sure.
of the early game experience in Final Fantasy is very weak, right? And a lot of people are worried that, oh man, you're just gonna hate it, and he's gonna flame it, and then his chat is gonna like um, throwing themselves at the game and being mean and stuff, right?
For Asmongold's sake, I hope he likes it because that man needs some more variety in his life.
Oh yeah,
He
and I
needs
mean
it.
it's difficult for to be a big streamer like that and play a different game because and I think that's probably the side that I find the most interesting is when I watch videos where he's like talking about where he like I think there's like a video on his second channel. I saw it featured on some other video where he's like kind of talking about less in a less official way, right? It's a second channel where he
Yeah,
just kind of plays stuff without
his
face
like
cam and
Treehouse talks. Oh, those ones. Yeah, like his
yeah.
Zach channel with his first name.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And he just kind of like talks about it like, "Oh, dude, it's so annoying like because I just want to I really just want to play a game, right? I just want to experience the game." But of course, now it's almost like political in a way, right? Like people
Yeah.
view him playing Final Fantasy as some kind of statement against WoW. You have the Final Fantasy fans that will like try everything to like convince him of how he would like the game. Everybody's gonna try to tell him how to play the game,
Yeah.
um, and and everybody's just gonna wait for him to say something and to clip out of context in a way, right? Like people will like you have like two fronts. You'll have the diehard WoW fans that are just waiting for him to hate Final Fantasy, and just be all like in your face about it. And then you
Hmm.
have the other side, which is the Final Fantasy fans, who will just be, who I'm sure will be super annoying and try to tell him how wrong
Hmm.
every negative opinion he has is.
And
It's
then you'll
just
have the non-partisans like me watching from the side, where it's just like you kind of roll your
yeah,
eyes at all the people who are trying to get him to have a certain opinion. Like
yeah.
there's
Also,
this.
but also that's
Go ahead.
also a player base where I think you can't win really, right? Like because either way, he's gonna offend somebody, and
Yeah,
I
and
think it's
which speaks to what should be the value he pursues most highly, which is what is the most interesting thing to him, and what does he get out of it? Because at the end of the
yeah,
day, um, when you're in the content game, you got to make content about stuff that you yourself care about. And
yeah.
he's been going on for a while about how WoW is a game he's having a hard time caring about. What there's this the original question I was going to ask you when I brought up Asmon is what you thought about his something that he said a little while ago where it was about World of Warcraft, and I'm not asking you to comment on WoW specifically, but just on the sentiment that
Okay.
WoW used to be a game that you wanted to waste your time on. Now it's a game that makes you waste your time, makes you feel like you're wasting your time. Um, which is a statement that I have all kinds of problems with, I think. But what do you think of that idea?
Well, I think what he means in particular is a couple of WoW game systems that force you to kind of play more than you want to in like unfun ways and like ways that I think the community has actually voiced they don't really enjoy. But
Like
they
what?
kind of you
Can you
kind of
remember?
have to do it to keep up. I don't know the actual systems. I watched a video on it, and I have a few friends who play. And it's just kind of the sentiment that people come out with is that like WoW doesn't respect your time. That's a
Hmm.
sentence I've heard a lot of times.
Which
Is
is a
WoW
very
apparently
weird
does not.
complaint because the basic promise that was born of WoW is that you will be rewarded for putting time in. And the idea that the purpose of the game is to respect the player's time, I don't know.
I think at the
It's
end
it's
of the day,
it's a
what
very
Asmund
new age
means is
gamer idea.
maybe yeah, true, definitely. I think a lot of I mean that's the basis of all of Guild Wars 2, right? It's the game that's
Yep,
respecting your time.
the anti MMO.
But yeah, great word by the way, great buzzword. But I think what Asmund really means is like that probably mostly the systems just aren't very fun. Like
Hmm.
the systems that make you waste your time don't do it in like a fun way that you actually want to do. It feels like a chore, right? And I think that's when like content becomes. I think that's why that system can fail quickly. Is when the content that you're forcing your players to do kind of isn't
Yeah,
fun anymore
and
in
the
a way.
weird thing,
And
so like I jumped into play Shadowlands over the winter, which is the first time I
mhm.
played retail WoW in over a decade. Um, with the I had two motivations to do so. Number one was I wanted to play a game with my friend who was playing, and number two, I wanted to know what WoW was up to. I wanted to have a basis of understanding, like some of the stuff I see from Asmon and the broader community. Um, also, I just like WoW. I always have liked it. But jumping back into it, my impression of most of the systems that players complain about being overly chore-like is that players just want to get things fast because they want to be done playing the
Yeah.
game. They don't actually want. I don't think they want what they think they want when they complain about there being too many chores. So the big common complaint that I've heard. So here's an example. So in order to accrue a certain currency that you need in order to improve your legendary items in WoW, which are necessary for playing different kinds of builds, you have to do this unique new game mode for Shadowlands called Torghast, which is the pseudo roguelike dungeon that they built into the game, and it's made
Okay.
to be played single player or to scale up to 5 players if you wanted to. So you can kind of play
Okay.
however you want. And in order to max out your weekly time gated currency for building legendaries, you have to run it twice a week.
Okay.
And one
That
of
doesn't sound too bad so far.
it's really not, especially after they nerfed the dungeon, and especially after
Uh-huh.
you get a few days played of power creep. It's a joke. You can
Yeah.
do a run in half an hour or less. It's like an hour of your
Okay.
time instead of half an hour. But so the complaint I hear from Asmon and from that set of players is that 2 runs is too many. We should only have to run it once. This is bullshit. This is a bullshit chore. But why are they doing
Really?
that chore? It's perceived as a chore because they're doing it for the reward only. And the thing is, a game like WoW is propelled by rewards. What these players seem like they're
Yeah.
actually asking for me in the highest sense when they say things like this is they want a game where they play for the experience, not for the reward. But in order to do that, you have to play a game that's not World of Warcraft. So I don't know what it is they think they want. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds a little bit like maybe more of like a bit of a burnout with the game itself, maybe to an
yes.
extent. And I think that's a dangerous thing to say because when you're in that position, and I have been in that position in Guild Wars 2, right?
Uh huh.
Um, that's an easy way to excuse somebody's actual concerns because
Hmm.
and it's hard for me to comment on this
You're just
because
burned out,
I don't
dude.
play World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Exactly, and because I got that response a lot, and a lot of my criticisms, I think, to this day were absolutely justified, right? And I'd repeat them immediately.
Okay.
Um, and but the amount of people that kind of dismiss your argument with the argument, hey, you're just burned out. You've just been
Hmm.
playing this long. You just need to do something else for a while, right?
Hmm.
And then you won't feel that way anyway. It's an easy way to kind of dismiss these kind of concerns.
Yeah.
Um, and it's hard for me to really assess this because I haven't played it myself, right? I don't know
Well, let's use the
how
Guild Wars example. Let's go to some common ground. Can you relate what I was just talking about back to one of your Guild
Mhm.
Wars things?
Well, I mean, Guild Wars 2 is a game that just naturally tries to respect your time as much as
Yeah.
possible, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you want to hear my complaints that I
Oh, how
had with
about
the
like
game
the
that still stand, right? Then,
what about like the all the time gating that went into the sky scale process? Did you progress through that yourself? Did you get your sky scale?
yeah, I did, yeah, I
Did you
got
hear the
it.
community's complaints about the time gating for it?
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Did you
yeah,
have
yeah.
a
People
take
hate
on it?
time gate in every way. Well, it was something that I personally didn't care so much about, really.
Uh huh.
There's a lot of like, that's a lot of that is just because I'm a little bit of a jaded veteran, right? There are just particular things I care about and particular things that I don't care
It's
about
not a
in a way.
battle that
I
you wanted
definitely
to
see.
fight.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the kind of debate where I didn't feel like this is not my fight to fight in a way,
Mm,
right? Like it's
okay.
um at least not in a fair way. Like I wouldn't do it justice because I wouldn't
Sure.
care enough about it, right? And but I see the reason. I see why people didn't like it, right? I see, like I mean, you kind of had a somewhat similar talk when you talk about unlocking the Griffin in Guild Wars 2, where a lot
Mm,
of people complained about the gold cost it has, right? Because it
right.
costs I think 250 gold,
Yeah.
which is a big gate to people, right? It's like these kind of
Yeah.
gates to what I think a lot of players consider content that everybody should have access to,
Hmm.
is yeah, can be inherently problematic, right? Especially time gates are just something I think time gates can
Or
be
wallet
done in a
gated. Let's be
way.
realistic.
Yeah,
For
yeah,
Guild Wars 2,
but
seriously.
absolutely.
Ask yourself
But
of all the people who came into Path of Fire who were new players, because let's be honest, only people who don't have that much gold are new players. If you were
yeah,
playing before Path of Fire, you had 250 gold. But
yeah,
probably there's probably a few
absolutely.
exceptions,
Yeah,
and
It wasn't a problem for me to afford. Like, and I've never been a player that had much gold in Guild Wars
Me
2. I've
too.
never been good at
In fact,
the market.
I only have 140 liquid gold on me right now. Like I never have a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
gold.
well there you go.
But
But if I
it,
if I saw something that cost 250 gold that I really wanted, I'd have that gold in 2 days
yeah,
if I wanted to.
or you just
Like I'd
liquidate.
know the ways how to acquire it, right?
Like I'm sure I have hundreds or thousands of gold and stuff stored away in my bank and material storage. Like
Yeah, exactly.
it's a matter
Like,
of doing the transaction, which I'm just deferring by sitting
yeah,
here with a little liquid gold. But so yeah, like for you and me, that's no problem. But for a new player, like they're looking at that gate and they're
the
like,
gate.
okay,
Yeah.
either I grind it out, which is what you hope they're going to do, right? That's the MMO story that we want to be telling ourselves, or they complain and quit, which is what you don't want as well. Or option three, which I think happens way more often than anyone else acknowledges, is people just buy the gold with dollar bills.
That is that is something about Guild Wars 2 that the more I think about it, the less I like, right? I used to always think about Guild Wars 2 as the like kind of the ultimate non-pay to win game, right? But
Right?
the more I think about pay to win and Guild Wars 2 in connection, the more I feel like Guild Wars 2 is actually the ultimate pay to win game.
Yeah,
You can
it
buy
is.
everything in
It
that
is.
game
It
for
is. This is a whole other
like
topic we should totally make
yeah,
time for. That's a very
yeah,
good
there's a
one. I think we agree about that. You know who
I actually
I think it'd be fun to debate on that would be Mighty Teapot, because I'm sure he would try to defend the game vociferously.
I mean, yeah, let's go. Let's do this. Let's do this. Oh, ooh, very spicy. I actually mentioned this the other day on. I don't even know how we got to it, but I was on Josh Foreman's. I hang on Josh Foreman's chat a
Yeah,
lot, right?
it's
When
a
he's
very
doing
chill
his
stream.
dioramas.
I love his stream.
Yeah, very much. And I really like his in like he has a like he's a very chill like dev, right? Like to talk
Hmm.
to, like I think he's somebody where I can go in and I can say like maybe a little bit less convenient opinion, and he'll be like, yeah, that's cool as long as we're being respectful, we can talk about this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So we
You
talked
can throw him
about
a hot
this a little
potato,
bit.
and he'll accept it graciously rather than dropping it on the floor.
Yeah, he'll respectfully talk to you about it, and that's all you want in a way, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm not going on there to like flame him for it, right? Or like
Mhm.
blame him for an issue. I just kind of, I don't even know how the conversation really went there. I think we were talking about like games in general, and like I think we were talking about E3 stuff and monetization stuff.
Uh huh.
And from then we kind of moved on to pay to win stuff.
Okay.
And I think I said like, in a way, I actually think it was too is pay to win, right?
Uh huh.
Um,
What did
and I
Josh
think
say?
all he like kind of said at the end
Oh, Roca, I lost you. Did a rating that delete you? Are you being censored?
didn't exactly say it, but I think it was
Rock,
fairly
I
how you
lost you
could
for
read through the
like
lines
30
that.
seconds. I lost you for like 30 seconds there.
Oh, okay. Am I back?
And NCSoft whacked your connection. I didn't hear any of what you just
Oh,
said.
wow. Why in Csoft? Okay. I was just gonna say that it was apparent from how he replied that they never intended for it. Like he and the people that he worked with
Hmm.
didn't seem to do this intentionally, right?
Right.
At least in their day-to-day content. I think a lot of this stuff is actually baked into the game from before release, right?
Right.
Because you could talk about stuff like your inventory space, the way that you solve that the easiest way, the way bank space is managed, you
Yeah.
know.
Creating problems and
Those are
selling
all,
solutions. The convenience
yeah.
economy. Right.
Exactly. And I think it was actually particularly the inventory space example that I gave. And you have like you immediately like you'll have people who disagree, who say that's not really pay to win, that's pay for convenience, right? That's
Hmm.
just pay that doesn't even really count,
But in
right?
Guild Wars 2, that is
That doesn't
winning.
even matter. Yeah, exactly. And I think so too. I think that when you start the game, you don't have much gold. You have like 2 gold in your inventory. You can't
Hmm.
buy 400 gems for gold. You have like your initial maybe 24 inventory slots from having like the initial 3 bags or something that you get.
20 slots to
The
start,
idea
plus like 3 or 4
is,
empty bags is I think what you have.
and also you have a game that's very heavily in terms of loot balanced around,
Yes.
kind of filling your inventory with a
Yeah.
lot of trash
Well,
items that you then have to
and the
salvage,
salvage economy where you have to buy salvage kits that go away. Like what a
which you can
hassle
also
built in that
undo.
is. Holy crap.
Yeah, Which you can also go beyond by, like, buying the one endless salvage-o-matic
Yeah,
from the cash store, right?
my
It's
very
like,
first microtransaction. I bought one for me and my wife.
yeah, which you can then also put into a shared inventory slot, which you can buy through the,
Yes, the
to
mega
get maximum value out of it.
convenience.
It does all, like, there are definitely built-in inconveniences that you solve through microtransactions in that game, which you could consider pay to win, or you could not consider them pay to win, right? I actually think both opinions are fair. You could argue in terms of, like, if we did a thought experiment, you could uh, argue both of them. Um,
Hmm.
But yeah, I just personally
I think
more and more think
I
that
don't know.
that stuff
I
is
think
pay
the
to
part of the
win.
argument that interests me when it comes to pay to win or not pay to win is um, with the way that the game economy is set up and the rewards and the power progressions is set up. What kind of design incentives does the monetizations does the business uh, of 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 transacting the game actually promote? So like you look at a game like this game and um, it's built off of selling you a game that the premise is that progressing in the game in terms of actual player power and the ability to affect other players and NPCs, that's all you do that in the game by yourself. That's all on your back. But if you want to change the way you
Mhm.
look, or if you want to be more efficient with your time, that's where you can pay in if you want. And that's
Yeah,
where the whole narrative of Guild Wars 2 as a pay sorry, a fair
pay to
microtransaction
win.
game comes
Okay.
from. But if you flip it on its head and say to yourself, okay, well, where are the actual progression paths in the game? What's actually meaningful? What you realize is that actually the there is no incentive to be powerful
Yeah,
in this game if all you're playing is PvE, which most people do.
true.
Um,
Yeah, and it's kind
because
of the first thing you have to identify when you talk about pay to win is what does win mean, right? What is the win
Yeah. You
scenario
put that so much more
that
clearly than I was going to. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there,
No, it was
right?
perfect. It was perfect.
Good.
I'm glad you did. I,
So, like, what does winning mean in Guild Wars 2, right? And I think and I think all those things are winning in a way. Like, I think probably the first let's break it down. What is winning in Guild Wars 2? Reaching max level. Can you buy max level through microtransactions in Guild Wars 2? Yes, you can.
yep. What
Um,
else?
what else? Maybe getting your crafters to max level. Can you buy boosters to increase your XP gain through the gem store? I think you can. I think there are
Yeah.
boosters you can acquire them in game
Yeah,
pretty easily though.
crafting
I think
experience
so.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's just say okay.
Also,
Let's say what do
you
you
can
need
buy the
to buy
gold
them?
to get all the materials you
Yeah.
need
Exactly. Exactly. I think
and
that's kind of the
boost it while
ultimate
you're along the
one.
way. Yeah.
Everything that
It's a
requires
double dip.
gold in the game
Yes.
is basically pay to win because you
Yep.
can convert gems to gold, and that makes every reward in the game that's acquirable for gold something that you can cash for.
A simple wallet crack. Yeah.
Um, so now no stats really give you an advantage, except maybe ascended stats at first, which
Which used
you
to be a
can
bigger deal,
actually.
but in anymore though, like
Yeah, but you could, for example, you could buy a legendary weapon for real money, and you could. That is technically a stat increase, right? Like from exotic, that's ascended stats.
the big pay to
It's
win from doing
very
that though
expensive.
is the cosmetic win. Like let's be honest,
Yes,
with legendary
exactly.
weapons,
Because
the
Guild Wars is just not a game that's based on stats that much, right? It's not the reward, the
yeah.
treadmill.
I mean, the warrior that I'm sitting here playing on stream while we talk right now is using the same stats. And if it wasn't for the fact that I got the legendary armor, which has the same stats as the ascended gear that I've been using ever since 2015 when I first started playing the game, like I've never changed the armor on this character. I've never needed to. Um,
Yeah,
I built my set of Vipers when Heart of Thorns came out. It's been just those two sets. No armor has ever been relevant on this character ever since for me. Um,
yeah. Well, there you
and
go.
and then all the progression in the game has been number one, doing interesting things. So like exploring new parts of the game, but that runs out very quickly. And I guess the mastery system that comes with it. But I mean,
It's actually kind of a fun little anecdote here. Is the Do you remember the time where Lazy Peon played the game?
yeah,
I
I
was
can't remember
actually
what his
talking to
take
Lazy
was.
Peon a lot.
Yeah. What did he have to say?
Um, I mean, he did like. I mean, he was generally a fan of the game, right? He made videos on it, right? Check out his channel if you
I can't
want
remember
the
what he said.
in-depth
Okay. Okay.
things. But like, what I just want to kind of go at a little anecdote here because he wanted to get the final gear, and he didn't want to really spend a lot of time on it at the time.
Uh huh.
Um, so he asked me, how can I? Basically, he asked me on advice, how can I cash for as good a gear as I can get?
Uh huh.
A lot of people had sent him materials. A lot of people had sent him gold and stuff.
Hmm.
And what it kind of boiled down to at the end was like I showed him like, okay, you have to craft your first ascendant, right? There are other ways to get it, but this is like kind of the fastest way. Um, so he went down into crafting them, and the one material that he couldn't buy, the one and only material that he couldn't buy from stuff
Spirit shards.
was bloodstone dust. Bloodstone
Oh.
dust and what are the other two called? You know, the crystal shards
Dragonite
and
ore and Imperial
yeah,
fragments.
exactly. Those three you cannot directly buy, but
Everyone has way too much
but
of them. If you play the game.
but exactly. It's one of these things that when you actually play the game, you get swamped with them. But in order to, if you have none of them, in order to get them, you have to like do a couple of hours of silver waste. And he was
Mhm.
literally like, okay, how do I do this without having to grind for like multiple hours?
Okay.
So I actually figured out at the time you can actually buy those on the crafts cash store as well. They added an item called I think it was like season one memory boxes or something. And
Oh.
when you opened those, you'd get these like black lion statuettes, and then you could use those black lion statuettes to buy certain items, and one of those items would be these what are they called? The wisdom stones or something that you need for ascendant
Okay.
crafting.
So there was an indirect
Um,
means that you
yeah, so like
engineered for him. That's hilarious.
basically, and I feel terrible about it because I should have just told him to play the content, right? But I was trying to help him at the time, right? He was like asking me for like a better way, and I kind of found it for him. But I mean, it's
Interesting.
just kind of like astonishing because that also means even ascended, you can get everything you need for ascended crafting from gold, which you can buy for money. So
Hmm. Hmm.
technically, even though it's not directly buyable, is actually indirectly buyable.
Yeah.
Um,
And even if you say it's not, exotic gear, which is easily buyable, is like what, 5 to 10% worse in terms of performance than Ascended?
yeah. And I'm actually gonna raise you this. You don't have to buy the gear because you can buy the content.
Uh,
Because it's for gold, it's legal to buy raids. You can buy every raid achievement from legal selling guilds in the game.
right.
That is not condoned. That is wait, condoned means sorry, language barrier, I'm sorry.
So if something is
Condoned
condoned, it's approved.
yeah,
So
exactly. It
it's
is
not
being
forbidden.
condoned by ArenaNet.
Yeah.
It's not forbidden to sell for in-game gold. As long as you don't pay for real money, you're allowed to sell content to the players.
Right.
And because of how the game is balanced, it's actually fairly easy for a lot of the sell guilds to do this.
Hmm.
So you can actually buy every raid achievement in the game, every single skin, if you want to, for gold, which you can cash for. So
Yep.
in a way, you don't even need to buy the gear. Like, you can just buy the content um, legally.
Yeah.
And that's
What
kind of the ultimate pay to win then in a way,
I
right?
did a
Because
talk a few weeks ago where I, in order to talk about this premise in Guild Wars 2 and this problem that I have with it,
mhm.
um, I did a comparison between Sunrise, one of the Gen 1 legendaries. I'm not explaining this to you.
Yeah,
You know this, but to everyone who might be listening to this.
yes.
And Sulfuras, which is the legendary two-handed hammer from the first raid in World of Warcraft. Um,
Okay.
and I talked through what you needed to do to get this weapon, because one of the major things I've always loved about MMOs is gear as a symbol of status. Um,
Yeah.
Seeing someone on like a badass proto drake or a really cool greatsword and being able to
Hmm.
understand the story behind that and have like a symbol of someone's achievement or something impressive someone did or unique or interesting or not
Yes.
uh, and basically my argument was that Sulfuras is this thing that when you see it, you know an entire guild put their resources behind one person to get this weapon because it's not a weapon one person can grind out by themselves. You have to have a
Okay.
guild, and it requires a guild level of resources to make one, and it requires an insane amount of luck. If you're
Okay.
if you're a guild clearing molten core every single week for a year, on average, you'll only be able to craft two for the entire year.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's insane.
yeah. So
Crazy.
it's an incredibly exclusive item, and
Mhm.
it's always cool seeing one in the wild. Like, ooh, the guy's got sulfurous. It's a neat
Yeah.
moment. When you see someone with sunrise, you never have that feeling. And I walk
Yeah,
through, okay,
absolutely.
what is making sunrise take? And I walk through the sunny side of that path, which is talking about the collection to make the precursor, which my wife and I
Mm.
actually did. It was our first legendary that we made. We did it together. It's
Oh,
pretty
cool.
fun.
Which was not even the initial design of it, right? Because initially it didn't have that collection. That was
Right.
added in Heart of Thorns,
That was a
right?
Heart
When
of
they
Thorns
actually
thing.
added collections.
Yeah. And
Um,
I love that. And I love those little bits of design when they're there. But because it's a Gen 1 legendary and it's BOE, basically at the end of
yeah,
my argument, I was like, none of this matters because anyone you see wielding Sunrise is like easy to just open their wallet and paid a couple $100 for this.
yeah, absolutely.
Like,
And a lot of them will not have done that collection. A lot of them will have bought the precursor of the trading posts,
yeah,
right? Even if they don't cash for it, they
yeah.
probably didn't play that content.
In fact, it's less efficient to play it because if
Yeah,
you total up all the material costs of doing that collection, it's more expensive than buying it off the trading post, even before you consider all um, the non BOE
without
stuff
the
you
time
have to do.
investment,
Yeah,
right?
without the time investment, it's a better way of putting it. So at the end of the day,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
It's
that
crazy to think about.
all the convenience built into a game like Guild Wars 2 creates a game world full of meaningless symbols and
Yeah.
players
I
wielding
I mean,
meaningless symbols.
I absolutely relate to this from like the radar perspective. I always wanted like an achievement in the game that I could feel kind of proud to have. Like
Mhm.
when people race for world first, when and this is what I used to do is like race for speed kills, um, because you wanted something that kind of makes you stick out as a player, but that kind
Yeah.
of and you could really get this in the game because at this point in the game, I think it's actually fair to say that a good 50% of the people that you will see with the Void in the Void title,
Yeah.
which to those people who aren't familiar with the game, is the title that you get for defeating what's probably considered the hardest encounter in the game, which is called Doom CM,
Doom.
a challenge mode, right?
Doom.
Um, you get a title called Voice in the Void, and it's absolutely reasonable to assume at this point that a good 50% of the people having this title will have bought it
Mhm.
and not actually done it themselves because it's
Mhm.
so much easier.
How
Because
hard would it
getting the
be?
Void in the Void title,
How hard is it
hmm,
for like a streamer like a teapot to carry a random to get that achievement on stream? Is it easy to do?
easy, easy,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
the other thing too. Is
I
it's
mean, he
just
needs,
streamers who need content.
yeah, absolutely, and I mean, Teapot does it every now and then. A lot of streamers every now and then, just for the fun of it, carry
Yeah.
a viewer through, or of course, it's even nicer when they actually teach the person, which they usually do, right? Rarely
Mhm.
do they actually go in and say, okay, just slash GG. This is what sellers do, right? When you
Mhm.
buy a raid, you just go into the instance, you slash GG, and then they just nine man it, and you're not part of the equation at all. You're
Mhm.
just you're just in the instance. Streamers don't usually do that, right? Streamers will at least teach you what's going on and
Mhm.
take you along, so you kind of earned it yourself as well, right? But it's not the thing is it's not even very expensive. It costs maybe 300, 400 gold
Mhm.
in Guild Wars 2. Um,
Just a little bit more than a
if
griffin.
you cashed that, it would probably be like what, $25, $30 maybe.
Yeah, cost of a mount.
Um, and or if you grind it for it, you that would be spending like 5 hours or 6 hours, maybe 8 hours. Let's say worst case, right? Let's say worst case, maybe like a 2 or 3 days of you actively grinding for gold,
Mhm.
and you'd have without doing the actual content, right? You'd have the most difficult achievement. So that title is basically meaningless. That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say. Long story
Yeah.
short, the title doesn't mean anything,
Right.
right? If you use that title, it's more likely you're a buyer because the serious raiders don't use it anymore because of that exact reason.
Yeah, because they know it's
Um,
been diluted.
yeah. So it's like there's no real in-game way to show off an achievement, right? None of the skins mean that the thing you just described was sulfurious. That doesn't really exist in Guild Wars 2.
Right. Yeah. And the reality is the cost of having symbols like that are so meaningful and interesting is you have to make them a pain in the ass to get. And you have to make them design them to be hard to access. And that's just like
Yeah.
So
Well,
I don't think that either there's a clear understanding of that when I think that the gamers who are getting into a game like Guild Wars 2 don't understand that. And I think that like watching Asmongold and the way him and the WoW community are processing World of Warcraft right now, and especially the way that they've been reacting to all like the cash shop stuff, like with New World and whatever, I think we're starting to see more of a mainstream gamer conscientiousness about this phenomenon that didn't used to exist.
yes. I think it's also like when it comes for like I think the kind of the vibe that I'm getting from all the World of Warcraft players is that it's really not just one single thing. It's just kind of a lot of things that they're unhappy with that kind of leads to a mood. And I've seen the same thing happen in Guild Wars 2. It's almost like a kind of a social event, right? Where the more things you're kind of um, unhappy with, it kind of leads you to this negative community mood. And once you're in this negative mood, you start seeing the negatives where before maybe you wouldn't have minded them too much. Suddenly you care about them a lot, right? Suddenly, this system where you're saying you are forced to play twice a week in order to get maximum profit, suddenly that feels
Right.
like, like you're being oppressed almost, right? But it's really more of the result of lots of things that you've been unhappy with in the game,
Hmm.
that just make you focus on it a bit more. And suddenly you start seeing things more harshly than they are, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well, the basic premise of having to do things in the game to get rewards that you believe you're owed is it's a it's a very inhuman mindset. I think it's a mindset of privilege. Um, and
the thing is, I always, because I think you're right? But I also like to think it's a bit of a sign of disappointment, right? Because to some extent, I do understand this stuff, and I don't want to paint it in too bad a way, right?
Okay,
Because
all right,
there's real disappointment there, right? There's this
yeah,
means that there have been, you know, and ultimately it's disappointment that leads to negativity like this, right?
hmm,
It's overinvestment. It's kind of, it's kind of like, the strongest hate is kind of born from love in a
yeah,
way. It's like because you're so invested in the game and you loved it so much and you see things that are less consumer friendly, that are not aimed at you, that feel like you're not being listened to, like you're being disregarded and like you're being treated as, I mean, basically, like a consumer that you're trying to get as much money out of maybe as you can.
hmm, hmm,
Then then there's a feeling of disappointment from that leads to negativity, right? It's
yep,
I think the exact same thing happening at was too, right? It's negativity is a direct result of disappointment. So
yep. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think that n- uh, disappointment can be a component of negativity, but it's not a requirement. Um,
no, definitely, but I do think it's mostly. I think in
so
this case, and in the MMO space,
I
it's
watched a really
often. I
great
think that.
I watched a really great video. I think I tweeted this out a little while ago.
Uh huh.
By a woman who I guess is like an English school teacher. Zoe B is the name of her name on YouTube, and she did this
Okay.
great video explaining why grades are just the fucking worst. That
Hmm.
grading makes school terrible. It's part of why school is so
Yeah.
bad. And
Okay.
if you listen to her talk about grades, her basic premise is um, grade, grades create an incentive for obedience. And
Hmm.
um, what you end up turning schools into are these big, kind of like almost like daycare systems where you're incentivizing these people to obey, not to learn, not to
Yeah.
become effective people in the world.
I
Um,
actually agree with that, and absolutely.
I think it'd be
Like,
inhuman not to. And but the thing
yeah.
about it that I found interesting is taking that same argument and applying it to the idea of rewards in MMOs, rewards in video
Okay.
games altogether. Actually, one of the the things I was thinking about doing for one of my Monday night streams is taking her video and literally replacing the word grade with loot with loot every
Okay.
single place,
Well, that'd be interesting.
because I think that the argument holds up. Um,
Yeah.
one of the things that we know scientifically is that when you give someone a reward for something that they already wanted to do, they will value the experience less than if you had not rewarded them. And these
Okay.
MMO gamers have been on this path for so many years of gameplay that's motivated by reward acquisition, that they get this mentality of obedience where when the experiences that are given to them to get the rewards that they are used to getting changes, like it's just this fucked up like system of like gamers want to obey, and if the experience of obeying is not enjoyable, they don't choose their own path, but instead they get mad at the creators of the rules. I don't know. At this point,
Yeah.
my
Well,
thesis
it's
is not so clearly thought out, but you kind of get the direction I'm talking about, right?
yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. I think you definitely have a point. It's to an extent. I mean, it's let me think about it for a little bit because it's
that's
a
fine.
heavy subject, right? You
I know, like,
I think at some point it kind of the whole it shifts from being about the experience with the added reward to being about the reward with the added experience, right?
yeah,
And
oh, yeah,
you and then the more the developer kind of pushes the experience in a way that that is less enjoyable for the consumers, right? The more that I think that's where kind of the disappointment then comes from. That's when people start feeling like their time is not being respected. Again, coming back to the quote from earlier, where you feel
yeah.
like, okay, at this point, like I don't want to do this, but I have to do it for the reward. I could do other things, but it will put me behind other players.
Oh my god,
And
that whole way of thinking just tilts me, dude.
I mean, but
I'm
especially
such
if you're
a
in a game like World of Warcraft, where you
I'm
where
such
you
a
where you
post
lose.
gamer in this regard. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
No, it's fine. It's fine. No, it's. I mean, if you're interrupting me, that means that you have something interesting to say. So,
Well, woman hope.
go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, like I lost the thread
Well,
of
I'm
it
saying
now.
if you're interrupting me, that must mean you have something interesting to say, just because I know you, right? But like,
Uh,
I wouldn't say that to
n-
most other people.
not some schmuck, huh?
Um, yeah.
Well,
But
I'll take that for the compliment it seems to be. Um, but yeah, like
yeah,
the idea of having to play content because you need the reward. This is a false premise that gamers create for themselves. Um, and why do they
I'm
need the
not sure how
reward?
true it is. I'm not sure how true it is in a game like World of Warcraft, because in a game of World of Warcraft you have a much more a harsh gear treadmill, right? And like your performance is much more defined by your
I don't
gear,
think it's that
right?
harsh. So
Um,
I cleared the heroic raid when I played Shadowlands over the winter. So like
okay.
I have an idea of how this went. I did some arena, I did some battlegrounds, I got some PvP gear. Um,
Hmm.
I didn't go as hard as I could. And I know that mythic rating is a tier above heroic, but I don't think a lot of people do mythic rating actually. In fact, I think most WoW
Okay.
players don't rate at all, and I think that's the dirty
Hmm.
secret. I think the dirty
Okay.
secret is most people play WoW casually. They make a bunch of alts and they do world quests and stuff like that. Maybe some dungeons. And I think that the dirty little secret is that the whole world of players and content creators who feed off of raids and arena and mythic dungeons and World of Warcraft are a minority who need to be kept happy in order to make sure that the message about the game is kind of positive. And I think World of Warcraft is
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
lucky because
Well.
they have Ian Hazacostas who came up as a raid designer, right? And
Hmm.
they really make that game for raiders in a way that like a game like Guild Wars 2 does not.
Oh yeah. And I think there's and I think it's actually a problem that Guild Wars 2 does not, right? Because and Guild Wars 2 does it because they want to kind of cater to a different community, right? They don't want to cater. They're the anti World of Warcraft, right? They don't want to cater to being all about raids, right? That's not what they identify as a game, really.
Like, Guild Wars
But
seems to
it's
cater to the silent majority that you don't hear from.
yeah, But at the same time, it's an important part of the community. These kind of veterans, a really important part,
Yes.
and they're more important than their numbers, I think. Because
Yes.
even if it's a few people, it doesn't even matter if they're streamers, it doesn't even matter if they're raiders. Like, it's these long-term players that are the ones that usually, that form guilds, that invite new players,
Mm-hmm.
that will have that Dungeon Tuesdays where, you'll bring your 4 new players in and you'll explain everything to them, that organize community
Yeah.
events and that ultimately make communities strive as well, which
Yep.
is, we talked about this before a little bit. It's kind of the foundation of an MMO in a way, right?
Yep.
Um, and so it's an incredibly important part of the game, and it's the players that when they're unhappy with your game, they will be bad press for your game. You see this in Guild
Mm-hmm.
Wars 2,
Mm-hmm.
veterans that quit Guild Wars 2, they don't go into the new games and tell everybody that raids in Guild Wars 2 are the best in the genre, right? They tell them that Guild Wars 2
I go
doesn't
and
really
talk
focus on
mega
raids, and
shit.
it's not even that bad, right? I actually tell people to play Guild Wars 2 quite often, but
Mm. Okay.
when somebody asks me how is it like to be a long-term Guild Wars 2 player, I can't lie to them, right? My experience as a long-term Guild Wars 2 player has been I felt abandoned. I felt
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not being important. I don't, the content that I like is not being developed much. I have to wait incredibly long to get the stuff that I want. And whenever I speak up about it, people tell me, that my concerns aren't valid because I'm a minority, right? That's
Right.
in a way what that felt like a lot of times. But so that's not exactly the best advertisement message, right? That you
Mm-hmm.
want other gamers to hear, right? That's immediately a lot of people judge MMOs by the long-term end game, by the long-term playability. A lot of people who, even though it will, they'll play 6 months before they even experience anything similar to what I may have experienced there,
Yeah.
right?
That was my
Um,
experience when I started playing Guild Wars.
Yeah, and they will have a great time in these 6 months, likely,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's what I keep trying to tell people mostly when I tell them about Guild Wars 2 is like this, but well, take what I say with a grain of salt because this is not going to apply to you for a long ass time.
Mm-hmm.
But still, it's an argument because people judge MMOs by this long-term replayability, by this. If I make this my main game, will this be my main game? Will I be happy with this as my main game, right? And
Yeah. And the
that's
real
kind of
question
what
is,
the
if you make a significant chunk of your life about being happy playing a game, will you be happy with any game?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm such an advocate at this point for playing multiple games. And that's why I think ultimately if you're a theme park MMO fan, I think you have to, and I think this is kind of like the future of the genre almost, is you kind of have to play multiple games
Mm-hmm.
and you can only hope that the developers stagger their releases so that and this has been working nicely for me this year so far. It's
Mm-hmm.
like whenever Guild Wars 2 comes out with an episode, I can play that for a week, and then Final Fantasy will come up with a new raid, and then I'll play that for a while, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping to build on that in the future. Right, next game I have on the horizon is Swords of Legends, and I'm
Right.
hoping that at some point, I'll be at the point where you can just say, okay, this week is the next 2 months are going to be raiding in Final Fantasy, and
Mm.
then maybe I'll unsub from Final Fantasy because they'll have a bit of a drought and maybe content that I'm not as interested in, and then
Right.
I'll go and I'll subscribe to another game for 2 months. Um,
Hey, Lanzer.
I think that's kind of the best way in a
Also,
way,
hey,
but it
Tenordi.
takes a lot of
Zyda.
initial investment in the games in order to like get max level, and it's something where I personally. The reason I don't play WoW like this is because I found it took much longer for me in WoW to get to a point where I could raid.
Mm.
And it feels like every time, when I have these 2 months where I play another game, I'd be left behind. I'd have to spend another 2 months building my character up to
When's the last
raid
time you
again,
played WoW?
Oh, that was probably last year. It was
During
before
BFA?
they did the level. Yeah, it was like it
Gotcha.
was when
Gotcha.
Shadowlands was announced and people were kind of hyped for it. And it was like a few weeks before they did pre-patch.
Gotcha.
That's
Okay.
when I wanted to level up in order to get max level and raid ready, so that when the expansion comes out, I could play immediately. But then they delayed it, and they delayed it right to the point where Final Fantasy brought out a new raid that I'd been waiting for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and so I kind of prioritized that higher and ended up not playing Shadowlands when that came out.
Yeah.
And
So, can I ask you a question? Does this talk
yeah,
about
yeah,
release
go ahead.
cadence pivot us to our our topic of the evening.
But I mean, it's been like what 1 hour and 15 minutes, and we haven't gotten to the actual point of the
Hey
conversation
man,
yet. So
it's
yeah,
7:45 my time. I got plenty of time. I'm worried about you, man. I'm
yeah.
worried
No,
about you
I
falling
mean,
over.
let's go there. Let's go there. Honestly, let's yeah, let's. You're being such a good moderator of the conversation. I'm losing track. I'm sorry.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So yeah,
So tell me, what do you want to talk about?
yeah. So the stream name of the stream is End of Dragons release speculation. This is you and I were talking offline. I was like, hey, hang on a second, hang on a second. Let me turn the stream on, and then we can talk about it there because this is way too interesting. I think. I think people will find it
Hmm.
fun. Um, so we were talking about um, End of Dragons, the third expansion for Guild Wars 2. When's it going to come
Uh-huh.
out? When would it be? When would be good for it to come out? And
Yeah.
what are ArenaNet's goals and slash pitfalls that they're scanning for with regards to the release? And I think that the two elephants in the room when I'm talking about that are the two major MMOs with scheduled releases for this year, and maybe more that I'm forgetting. I think you're more up on this stuff than I am. Which, to my mind,
Hmm.
comes to mind is New World and the Final Fantasy expansion.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say
And
those two are the biggest two contenders.
and like a pale
My
third
list.
would be the new raid for World of Warcraft whenever it comes out, the 9.1.
9.1, I think, right? It's called. Isn't that
Yeah,
sometime soon?
yeah, that's right. Like, and there's like a mega dungeon and a new raid, and people always come back to WoW to raid, or a lot of people do
Yeah.
anyway.
Yes. Yes.
So there's those things. Um, so the thing I
Oh,
think
sorry.
that is of interest to me here is, um, so I think the thing that the community seems to be latching onto, and I think this is probably smart, is it's not good for Guild Wars 2 if it releases at the same time these other big MMOs do, because Guild
Yes.
Wars 2 has traditionally had a smaller place in the MMO conversation than certainly than WoW and Final Fantasy, which has been kind of its star has been rising for a little while,
Yes. Hmm.
to the point where, as we mentioned earlier in this little conversation, that there's this great meme going on around about how it's now the biggest MMO, bigger than World of Warcraft, which I think there are a
Yeah.
number of problems with that analysis, but it certainly seems to
Yeah.
be at least
It's the
culturally
current.
it's
Yeah.
it is
Right.
the MMO that is cool to like right now on the internet.
Final Fantasy right now is definitely kind of at the pinnacle. It's like, I mean, this is of course. Did we talk about it in our talk earlier off stream, or was it already on stream when we talked about this article that recently made a lot of news in the MMO genre on YouTube? That basically
That was on the
headlined that
stream.
Final
Yeah.
Fantasy had now. Okay, yeah, had taken over WoW in terms of active players, and that's been a huge headline, right? And
Hmm.
I mean, Shadowbringers was such a huge, incredible win for Square Enix, right? Such a big success, and Endwalker in a way. I don't know how familiar you are with the genre, right? But Endwalker, what Endwalker actually does is it concludes a storyline that started since ARR, which is the reboot of the game.
Oh,
You
all the
know
way
how the
back
game like
to when they. So yeah, I watched the
yeah, they
fantastic.
relaunched the game. Yeah, and they started a storyline then that hasn't concluded yet. It's been like a red line through all of the expansions.
How long has that been?
And that's been like 8 years, I
Oh my
think.
god.
It's been yeah, it's
The
been going
reboot was
on
eight
that
years ago?
long. I think it was like 2012, 2013, yeah.
Okay.
I think
Okay.
so. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. But they've been that's how long that story has been going on, you
Mm-hmm.
know? It's been this arcing story. It's called Zodiac versus Heidelin, right? It's like the
Okay.
force of good versus the force of evil in a way. And
Okay.
of course, in Final Fantasy, you play as the warrior of light, right? One of them is kind of like your goddess, and the other one is basically like the devil in a way, right?
Okay.
But there's a lot of we don't know everything yet. Anyway, I don't want to get too deep into it. I just kind of wanted to quickly
So is
give
this
the
like
the, the sketch of it,
so
and it's
the major storyline that I can compare this to is like Guild Wars 2 with Aurene. Is this more
yeah,
important to the story of
call it
Final Fantasy or less important than Aurene? Like help me
similar.
contextualize it.
It's on a
Similar.
global god level that yeah, it's Elder Dragon space. It's yeah, yeah, it's
It's
basically what the
fantasy. How creative
it's the
can we really
foundation
get?
of the earth. I
Okay.
mean, it really, I mean, they get pretty crazy about it, right? It's like the entire world got split apart by one of them and their battle in a way, right? And
Ouch. Sounds
in order to
painful.
seal the other away. And I don't want to spoiler it, nor do I want to get like super deep into it. But it's like it's very large scale. You're
Real
the you're
quick
the
though.
you're the
Real quick
you're
though.
the shining hero.
How does the
Yeah.
community regard the story? Do they like it? Do they ignore it? What's the general sentiment
Dude,
about the story?
Final Fantasy is considered the best story game MMO out there. I think it's like people love
Hmm.
it. Like it's probably more known for having a good story than it is for the raids, and end game
Interesting.
stuff,
Okay.
which is probably the second best thing it's known for, right? But I would definitely say the thing that made Shadowbringer such a huge success was that the story is fantastic,
Huh.
absolutely. And the game kind of has like some early difficulties. If you started playing Final Fantasy today, you'd hate the early story. It has a lot of fetch quests, a lot of kind of boring
Sure.
story, and a lot of world building. A lot of Final Fantasy games do this kind of early on as well, right? Where they kind of build up the universe, all of the side characters, which aren't as
Mm-hmm.
interesting, but they may play a role later. But they've been setting up an incredible amount of story early on, like an incredible amount.
Okay.
Like you will interact with a character during like kind of a living world NPC in like Heavensward that becomes one of the main characters in the Shadowbringers expansions.
Oh, that's
One
cool.
of the the Alliance raid, which is like a 24-man kind of easier raid. It's not super difficult. It's more intended to be like for everybody.
Okay.
Um, called the Crystal Tower, right, is actually a major story thread that leads up to the major story and to the conclusion of Shadowbringers.
Story in the raid?
Um,
Is that allowed?
yeah, it's like not well, it's actually mandatory at this. They made it mandatory actually at some point. They made
Okay.
it mandatory to play the final
Hmm.
episode of Shadowbringers to have completed that raid, so that you have the
So
full. But again, it's a casual raid. It's not a savage raid. It's on the difficulty scales.
when
Is
you're forming
you
raids
know
in Final Fantasy, is there like a matchmaking queue, or do you have to form them manually like
yeah.
you do in Guild Wars?
Well, I mean, you have both for the like when we talk about real raids, like we talk about Savage
Uh,
raids, which is like the high difficulty raid
kind of like
mode
Mythic
in a
and
way.
WoW. Okay.
I guess, yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's another difficulty scale above that, but that's like kind of a separate thing.
Okay.
But this is like considered your raids, right? Your difficult raids, called Savage. And for those, you would use the Party Finder, which is the LFG basically in Guild Wars.
Hmm.
And for the other stuff that isn't considered as difficult, all that other stuff is more made to be puggable, more easily accessible, um, not nearly as punishing. You can go in there with like as a new player and not know anything, and you'll clear, right? Like um, and that's usually on like a daily matchmaking system. A lot of people do that as a daily. They have like a daily system for it to encourage more people to do it, so the content stays populated.
Cool. Cool.
Um, but yeah, that's basically how it works, right? So they made that mandatory. It's pretty easy to get into an instance. A lot of people run it, and yeah, if you pay attention to the story, then that sets up Shadowbringers. And I mean, talking about that, there's a certain brilliance in that, right? Setting up a story like 6, 7 years before it happens, right?
Yeah, it's
Um,
kind of cool.
and they and
It's
it's honestly, I almost want to like maybe I'll send you like a clip after the stream. They did like a
sure
thing at their announcement event where they kind of show the metaphors to um all of their expansions, and it just blew me away the first time I saw it
the
because
metaphors. Uh huh.
all of the title pictures of them are set at a different time of the day,
Uh huh.
and basically, A Realm Reborn is like is the sunrise and is the morning, right? Then Heavensward is midday. Stormblood is the next expansion after Heavensward, which is all like more reddish colored, and it's like dawn of the evening.
Uh
And then you
huh.
have Shadowbringers, which is the night,
Dusk.
and Endwalker is gonna be the next morning again. And that's like the cycle.
Oh.
It's so fantastic. It's honestly it's
Ooh.
just mind blowing the way they did this,
That is
and
hype.
kind of revealed this.
That is hype.
It's such a meta level of storytelling.
Uh huh.
Like this is at this point, it's not even just this story arc anymore. It's about the story of the game, right? It's because A Realm Reborn itself is the morning after the death of 1.0 for the game, right? It's
Mhm.
the whole story of how they revamped the game after it was such a fiasco at the beginning.
Okay.
So it's like
So
it's a
this is a
fantastic
super
meta
important
level.
expansion for Final
Yes,
Fantasy,
exactly.
and it's
It's a
still on the
major
rise.
thing.
So
Yes.
okay, well, let's think about this from a Reading or NCSoft perspective. Do we have a release date for Endwalker?
Yes, we do. Wait, let
Wait,
me actually look it up to make sure I say the right one.
okay,
It's November. It's 23rd of November.
okay. So right around Thanksgiving, if you're in the U.S. Um,
Yeah,
my
exactly.
American centric worldview. Apologies. Uh, so yeah, like just before the holidays. Um, Now, I know that one of the we talked at the start of this conversation about how Guild Wars 2 is currently doing this living world story review kind of thing where there's an
Yeah,
incentive to go back and repeat the old content, and those achievements are being rolled out week by week, and which kind of plots a course of we will be caught up to the story by X date. Do you happen to remember?
exactly.
I know you were telling me earlier what that date was. Do you remember what
I
that
think
was?
a community member of Wooden Potatoes' community
Uh huh.
actually calculated it out, and I think it like ended at the 9th of November.
Okay. Okay. So
So
like 2 weeks before Endwalker would hit.
pretty much, yeah.
So
And so yeah, that kind of raised that concern for me,
yeah.
right? And that's how I like kind of stumbled on that topic again
Uh huh.
recently. Is what if they actually plan to release then? Is that actually a good release date? Do you want to release End of Dragons 2 weeks before Endwalker?
Right.
Um, because I think no, I don't think it's a good idea. I think that actually End of Dragons is a really, really, really important expansion for Guild Wars. I think End of Dragons is like almost their last chance, to actually put themselves on the market again and become one of the, let's call it A tier MMOs, right?
Yeah.
Because I think Guild Wars has kind of fallen out of the A tier. I think Guild Wars was an A tier MMO alongside with Final Fantasy and Elder Scrolls Online. Maybe WoW was an S tier MMO in that time,
Hmm.
like 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I
Hmm.
think it's. I don't think it's really there anymore. I think it's kind of fallen more into like a B tier, where you'd probably rather compare it to titles like Terra, maybe or Blade and Souls, maybe that aren't quite as actively played anymore as
Yeah.
as
They're theme park MMOs that have a stable audience and a carved out niche,
yeah.
but that aren't taking the world
But
by
they're not the
storm.
center. Yeah, they're not the center of attention anymore, right? They're
Yeah.
not the big ones you hear a
They
lot
aren't
of
the
people talk about.
darlings of the
Anyway,
MMO community, which is its own
yeah,
has its own
and
interests.
they
Real,
definitely have a healthy player base, and they're good games in their own respects.
uh,
But they're not on the big stage right now. And
right.
it's like kind of like this is I feel like this is kind of Guild Wars 2's chance to kind of come back after their hardships, after all the horrible stuff they had to go through with the layoffs and IBS not probably working out the way they wanted to, and so
Yeah,
uh
a lot of threads we can pick at there. But before I give you kind of my response to that, there's a couple questions in the chat.
yeah.
I wonder if you know the answers to. First off, Dark Chikaru, hey, what's up, man? Kenson asks, do you happen to know how crossplay works in Final Fantasy 14? I have no idea. Is it just a PC only
um
thing, or is it on consoles too?
No, it's yes, you can play it on PlayStation. I
Oh,
mean, it's
interesting.
well, I mean, the game has UI set up for controller. You can very easily play the game on controller. It's optimized for that. A lot of PC players play on controller as well,
Oh, that's
just because they
interesting.
think it's more
That's a nice difference.
convenient for them.
You can't really play
Yeah,
WoW with a controller, and that's not very common in Guild Wars, I don't think.
it's really set up for it. It has like a whole setup for it, and that's partially because of the crossplay factor, right?
Makes sense.
And I mean, you have, I mean, other than the fact that you can't really interact with a key without a keyboard, right?
Yeah, you can't chat.
You can play. I mean, it's there's nothing too special to it. You play on the same platform with everybody else. You just play on a console. Um,
Yeah, so in a That's a pretty
It's
interesting difference between it and all the other MMOs that are out there.
They recently gave us support to PS5 as well, so you can play on the PlayStation 5 now, or
Uh
at
huh.
least for like the last couple of months. You
Huh.
can, I think, still play it on PS4, and they like everybody who already had it on PS4, I think, got the upgrade for free as well to the
Okay.
PS5 version. But yeah, you don't really have a downside. The only downside I guess you have for playing on PlayStation is you can't use the third-party tools that computer players use. Like DPS meters and
Right.
stuff like
Add
that.
on stuff like that. Locked
Yeah.
down by the consoles. Makes sense.
But other
Okay.
than that, you really have no disadvantage. You
Huh.
you run the game, I think,
God,
on a stable, good FPS.
I wish that I could tolerate the Final Fantasy IP. It sounds like an interesting game to play, but I'm just so turned off by the aesthetic of it.
I get it. I get it. A lot of people are, and it's fair enough. I think it's absolutely fair. I mean, if you
Yeah.
ever want to give it a go, right? I mean, I think you'd enjoy the story, but it can be very anime in a way. Like
Yeah.
I don't think it's necessarily. I don't think a lot of people that kind of shout "weep" at the game.
Hmm.
I don't think that's super right. I don't think the game is necessarily weep. Uh, if
Okay.
I compare it to games that I would consider weep, if you look at games like Genshin Impact, right? If you look
Oh.
at games like what's the weep dark so if I look at like Neo Genesis PSO2, um which is another game that's launching soon, by the way, another
Oh,
MMO,
okay.
that one's really anime themed, right? Final Fantasy kind of has its own appeal. Did you know that Final Fantasy is actually based on Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, like the initial one game was actually based on Dungeons and Dragons,
Hmm.
and I think
They,
you can kind of see that Final Fantasy kind of has its own aesthetic. If you compare that to just anime is kind of a broad word almost. If you look at, I mean, just Google Final Fantasy artwork or something,
yeah. And like I don't know.
and you'll
Yeah. Like
see it doesn't
this is a
necessarily have an
debate.
immediate.
I'm not super well prepared to defend my position on the aesthetics of Final Fantasy, but I tend to
Yeah,
have
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to
a
like turn
pretty
it into that. I just
strong like negative reaction to anything that kind of suggests the weebness of the world.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, I know you're not a big fan of anime, and that's really fair enough. And I absolutely get that. Like, an aesthetic of the game is very important, right? I think it's actually part of the game why I personally never got into WoW as much, because I didn't really like the cartoony aesthetic as much. To
oh,
me,
interesting.
WoW looks very cartoony, right? And that's something I could never really super get behind.
Okay.
Um, so I absolutely get it.
Yeah.
But
Well,
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah,
Like
at the end of
but I mean, the whole reason I played Shadowlands is to kind of know what was going on with it. Maybe I'll give it a whack when it comes out in November. We'll see. But anyway, we're talking about End of Dragons, right? So
yeah,
your
and
basic position
basically what
is it's not a good beat for End of Dragons if it comes out in a way
yeah,
that competes with Endwalker
and that kind
or
of
these other
And that
games.
kind of got me thinking, what is a good time for End of Dragons to
Oh.
release, right? Just like putting apart the whole calculating this is when all the content will be done, so that's the most likely time they will do it. What would actually be the best time for them to launch, and why would the times where we right now assume they will launch maybe not be a good time to launch, right?
Hmm.
And and that kind of leads you to that time, and I kind of like uh, this entire year, right, is basically the year of MMOs. I don't think we've had this many MMOs released in one year in a decade. Like,
Hmm.
when is it- like there's like 5 MMOs coming out this year in the
Really?
West. Um, you have, I mean, of course, you have. Let's say Endwalker isn't an MMO release, but let's just count it as a big release for the purpose of this, real quick, right? You have
Okay.
New World that will come out.
Yep.
You have Lost Ark that's coming out.
Oh
You have
yeah.
Swords of Legends that's coming out. You have
Okay.
PSO2 that's coming out. All of these are titles that, not all of them are maybe the strongest rivals to Guild Wars 2. Maybe PS2 isn't as big, and maybe, I mean, I do see a lot of people look at Swords of Legends, and I
I know
definitely see
you
more
really
people
enjoyed
than
that. Yeah.
I really liked it. I really liked Swords of Legends. But
Hey
I also
Henry,
see a
how's it
lot of
going?
hype going on for Lost Ark right now. I watch a lot of videos on YouTube, of about different MMOs and what people think of them. Like Just Strafe Haze and
Man, he is
Hero
killing it
TV.
with MMO stuff
Um,
lately.
a lot of these, yeah,
I don't. I haven't
they're
liked
getting to
Kira's
pretty
takes
big.
very much.
Yeah, I don't like all of them either. But what I want to kind of get at is like these are like the big MMO content creators, right? That I
Yeah.
think kind of a lot of people look at when they talk about new games, right? So when these people talk about these games, that means they're kind of in the public eye, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And of
Yep.
course, I like kind of cross-reference and say, I'm on Twitter a lot. I have a lot of friends who are content creators. I look at what do these people play, right? And a lot of them are really hyped about Lost Ark, dude. A lot of players.
Huh.
Like I have like ex Final Fantasy streamers, like I have ex BDO streamers. They're all really excited for Lost Ark, even though it has like really blatant pay to win
Diligent
issues in
Henry.
my eyes. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I'm just kind of throwing out basically there are like 5 noticeable MMO releases
Gotcha.
um,
In other words, a
in
lot
the
of
second half of
competition.
this year. Yeah, one of them being
So,
the probably most anticipated MMO release this year, and another one that has major eyes on it, which is New World, right? Because that's the first big MMO launch from Amazon Studios that everybody has their eyes on.
so competition
And
for End of Dragons entails that people who might play it would instead choose to play something else. So these other titles are comparable in some way. Um,
yeah, and I'm looking at this mostly from like the marketing perspective, and
okay.
my worry is that it's not necessarily that people who know about End of Dragons and know about Endwalker will just choose to play Endwalker, because they think it's the better game. I'm not looking at it from that perspective. I just think that people will not hear about the existence of End of Dragons
Mm-hmm.
because everybody will be covering
Because of
Endwalker.
the hype for
You
Endwalker.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, because the hype wave for Endwalker is so big right now that all these content creators, they'll be talking about Endwalker. All these the public eye will be on Endwalker, and it would require a lot of marketing in
Mm-hmm.
order to actually make bring End of Dragons to the table for people in the first place.
Did Path of
Um,
Fire get a lot of
and that's
marketing? I don't remember it being very well marketed.
No, Path of Fire was poorly marketed at best, really.
Was
Like,
it?
I mean, what they did for Path of Fire was the final Living World episode had a teaser trailer at the end, which
Right.
gave you the date for like an event that was happening 1 month after that trailer, which was the announcement event. And at the announcement event, they then announced the release date, which was another month later. Um, so you got your first Path of Fire trailer that kind of showed off, Balthazar and Krokotoric 2 months before launch without any kind of event to it. The actual event that gave you info about the expansion, that was only 1 month before release. So they
Mm-hmm.
had a 1 month window to build hype, and they didn't build hype at all, right? They didn't build
Mm-hmm.
much hype at all.
So
It was kind of hard contrast in
compare
the way they
that.
did Heart of Thorns.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like contrast that with Heart of Thorns, where we had this long cycle with a drip feed of information, right?
Yeah,
And um,
exactly.
and uh, and also, I think with Heart of
The-
Thorns, another interesting thing that is very different is that Path of Fire, I feel like really honed in on what a certain audience of Guild Wars 2 players that is for the most part not the people who want to play raids and do repeatable content. It's people who want to do the story, single use, casual stuff. Um,
yeah,
and whereas
yeah,
Heart of Thorns to me, part of what was so exciting to me about it was kind of it felt like the first step into a more core MMO world because they announced raids. Um, they introduced a new PvP game mode, Stronghold, right, which we didn't know was going to be a flop
yeah.
at the time. Um, we had a whole new system of masteries, which didn't exist before that. We had a whole new system of elite specs that didn't exist before that. It seemed like the start of years and years and years of fun, repeatable, worthwhile MMO gaming. And
Yeah.
then it seems like there was just this like record scratch, course
And
correction.
then they couldn't deliver on it, right? A lot of the promises they made, they had to pull back the legendary weapons. They had
Yeah.
to the legendary armor they promised was
Well,
just a side note at the time, right?
here's a
And
disturbing question for you. It's a very devil's advocate type question. Was it that they couldn't deliver on it, or did they chose not to deliver on it? Right?
I think when it comes to legendary weapons, I think they actually couldn't. I think they actually I think they actually stated this is they underestimated how much work because if you think back, it wasn't just the legendary weapons they announced. It was also the format of legendary collections.
Mm-hmm.
So they added all of these collections in order to create precursors to all the existing legendaries and to the new ones. And they had this really high standard to say that every legendary weapon collection has to be like a real story. There has to be like
Right.
a narrative, and they put so
Actual
much work
gameplay.
into it. And
Not.
if you
Yep.
play the Chuka and Champawat collection, you'll see
Yeah.
that it's
That's when
massively
people
different from
always
anything
prop up
else.
and say that is it the
Yeah.
biggest example of it being a success. Yeah.
It was so well done, and of course you also have like the Nevermore collection, which is also really fun. And it's just they put a lot of work into this, and they
Mm-hmm.
absolutely underestimated how much work it would take. So by the time Heart of Thorns was supposed to ship, they were like, "Hey guys, we couldn't do it. We only ship with like what 5 legendary weapons or something at the
Yeah.
time." And they
And all
said
the
at the
Gen 1
time that
precursors, right?
yeah, exactly. Gen 1 precursors also. And the rest of the legendary weapons is indefinitely suspended, was
Mm.
the statement at the
Right.
time.
That was a
Which,
horrifying
of course,
statement.
later, yeah, people, oh, wow. And of course, at the time, people didn't know about Living World yet, right? They had this long ass content drought for open world players where there was no new open world coming out, you know?
Yeah, for 9
Um,
months. 9 months before and
yeah,
after the expansion.
Yeah, which was funny because that was the time when we got the most raids at the time, but a lot of people didn't play raids yet, and they didn't get any new open world content. A lot of people perceived it as a content run. Anyway, like to kind of come back to the beginning of the topic before I get on a big old rant and sidetracked again, um, they kind of overhyped and underdelivered on Heart of Thorns. On Path of Fire, they kind of underhyped, and they did deliver. I think they did
Yeah.
deliver fairly well.
Yeah,
They could have hyped that more. But
which is consistent with the general theme of the studio we saw once Mike O'Brien took over as game director.
yeah, and Mike O'Brien's policy really became we only advertise once we know we can
Mm-hmm.
ship, kind of once it's ready. That's when we start hyping. We
Mm-hmm.
no longer hype things that we haven't finished yet, and and you can of course say that that is great, right? In a way, because you can really trust that now, and in a way, we were then able to really trust that whatever was announced, we knew would actually happen, right? And fairly soon too. But on the downside, they stopped hyping stuff early on, right? And you need to hype stuff early on, in my opinion. I don't think you can get
Yeah.
away in the MMO industry without advertising your game until such short notice. I
Well,
think you need to hype the game up.
unless
Um,
unless the expansion isn't to get new players to play the game, it's to make your existing player base happy until you can release the next game after Guild Wars 2,
yeah.
right?
But then I still think that's a wasted. That's a almost a waste of effort. I think you really need to get if your plan is to actually go for another game now, right? I think that's kind of like the tinfoil hat theory, right? It's like, hey, we're going into like
I
Guild
think it's
Wars
pretty
3 or whatever
realistic,
other
dude.
game, right?
I
Yeah, I
think
think it's realistic
I
too, but
think that
I,
that's
and
exactly what was supposed to happen after War Eternal, man.
yeah, but until that's tangibly, backed by statements or something, I'm gonna keep. I have the same
All right,
speculations,
all
but
right.
until it's said somewhere, this is a tinfoil hat theory, right? Um, but
I don't know. That tinfoil hat
on
is feeling pretty structurally sound, but go ahead.
Yeah, it is. It's a very well made head. Let's just say
Yeah,
that, right?
yeah,
It's
very
that
aesthetically
one keeps the
pleasing,
microwaves out for sure.
very
But
effective.
it's but it's still it's like an unproven theory, right? It's like just a fan theory at the end of the day. So where was I going with this? Yeah, like even if that is your plan, though, you'd want to get as much like people onto this as possible now, right? To like trust your project, to see that you're capable of doing something great, right? Like, why would you not do that?
Well, I
Um,
mean, I'm not sure if I agree with that argument either because um,
and even in terms of finances, wouldn't you want to get the maximum amount of finance in order to
well,
to
it's
to to pay for that
it's
new
about
game?
ROI, right? Return on investment. So if you put in twice the amount of effort and don't get twice the amount of outcome, then you don't want to do that. You want to put in the minimal amount of effort with the maximum amount of outcome, as if you're talking from a business perspective, right?
Uh-huh,
And
uh-huh.
if your plan is to not pivot to a game that is like Guild Wars 2, right? Let's say it's fundamentally different in some way. Either the IP is totally different, or the way that the game works is totally different. The game world, the way people come together and play, maybe it's single player. Who knows? Maybe you're pandering to a console audience who's never heard of Guild Wars. If that's what you're doing, then how important is it for you to attract people to play your PC only MMO? Maybe it's not that important.
Maybe, yeah. But doesn't that also mean that then that entire expansion isn't important because you're catering to a community that even that the current game already isn't your target audience
Again,
anymore?
it's return on
Wouldn't you?
investment. The and this is again not provable. It's just educated speculation. Um, it's
Couldn't they have just
it's
stopped after Ice
worthwhile
Fruit Saga
to
though?
the extent that it
Yeah.
successfully converts the people who will pay for Guild Wars 2 merchant
Hmm.
microtransactions to actually pay for it. And I think we
Okay.
know with all games like Guild Wars 2, like 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of the players. Um,
Yeah.
not and
Yeah.
you and I don't speak for those players, for better or for
Yeah.
worse.
It's the old 80-20 theorem thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and
It's
it could even be
an,
more severe than that for all I know.
another thing though is if you look at the quarterly numbers for Guild Wars 2, it's every time they do an expansion,
Yeah,
it spikes
it doubles.
massively, right? It's a
Yeah,
huge spike, and I feel like either way you kind of turn this, getting this spike to be bigger is probably the biggest increase to their profits they can make, right? This is like an expansion is like the one big chance they can actually attract a lot of players.
I don't
Even
know,
if they
man.
just play it for a day, even if they don't play it for a long time, they'll buy the expansion and they'll play it for a week or something,
I think you're
right?
making an argument that makes people who want Guild Wars 2 to be successful happy, but not a successful business argument. I'm just gonna put that out there.
Maybe, yeah, yeah. I
That
mean, the thing is,
that's where I'm coming at it
it's
from. Like if I'm NC Soft, if I'm a studio whose job is to make video games, what decisions am I making and why? Because we've seen, and a lot of this is informed by all the things that you've lived I've lived through, and all of which you've lived through too, and many much more because I started playing in 2015. Like all the weird turns and twists that Guild Wars 2 has taken over the years, and why did this happen and then not go anywhere? Like why is the game the way it is? Why is it not marketed? Why are there no more raids? Why do we not, are not communicated with about what we can expect? And just in general, why are we promised expansion like features that we don't seem to then get? Like why do these things happen? The likely answers to all these questions suggest to me the only thing that makes sense is that there are good business decisions for doing these things, and those things are going to be complicated. But at the end of the day, man, if Guild Wars 2 was truly the model of the future that had a huge amount of growth, we would have seen an expansion in 2019. You know?
well, I mean, that's a whole. I mean, we're kind of like diving into a topic that had other factors at play as well, right? Because we know that the reason stuff we know that they had other plans before Iceberg Saga, right? We
Yep.
know that they were working on other IPs, and
Yep.
we know that the reason of the layoffs were these IPs not working out, and
Mm-hmm.
C-Self basically stepping in and making a decision based on their bottom line, right? In order for them, which at the time said that ANET is basically forced to stop working on all other IPs and focus 100% on Guild Wars 2, right?
We don't know that for
Um,
sure. All we know
well,
is
that
that
was the
is that projects were shuttered. We don't know that they went to 100% to Guild Wars 2.
yeah, it was like kind of the impression at the time, I
That's
guess.
what
Or
the
like I'm not
community
sure if
story
somebody said it.
is, which by the way I think is foolish.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was like I mean there was some kinds of statements out there. But I'm not sure what it was
Yeah, it
anymore.
was
Like
like
it's a long time ago.
now the studio can focus more on Guild Wars 2. It's like in businessy
Yeah,
type weaselly type language, and I don't say that negatively, but like that's the way that this stuff has to be communicated about. Like
yeah, no, absolutely. And it's kind of Oh, dude, I keep losing track of my thoughts now. It's I'm starting to notice that it's
We've
fucking busy.
ranged too widely, my
It's
friend.
it's it's because it's a difficult topic that requires
Yes.
some thought, right?
Yep.
Um, but like they didn't make that decision. I actually think probably they already had the plan back then. I think there's like some really good cause to believe that back then they already planned to potentially quit Guild Wars 2 after the Living World Season 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And kind of move on from there.
Yep.
There've been like some I think Jessica Price made a statement about it that they were supposed to like write the story in a way that it could end but also could be continued.
I think
Um,
there's too much circumstantial evidence suggesting that that was the case for us to ignore that as the most likely possibility. Yes.
I think there's one other scenario that's very believable, and that's
Okay.
that Guild Wars 2, that ArenaNet wanted to keep Guild Wars 2 going, but actually go away from a expansion-based game and turn it into a fully live service game where it's all about where they basically, and I think that was the initial premise with the what you said earlier with expansion-worthy features, right? Is I think they might have planned to, instead of going for expansions, actually continue to just do Living Worlds updates without expansions, but make those so much better in a way, right? Make those actually have elite specs in them, new legendaries, and actually, well, yeah,
I think
expansion sized features. Um,
I think if I sat in on a like a fly on the wall and heard a conversation about at ArenaNet talking about that, I would think that they were fooling themselves because
yeah, yeah,
they
that
know
was my reaction as
they've
well.
already
I don't
learned
think
this
that was.
lesson, and so I think either that's us thinking that Arena is stupid or us being wrong, and
No, I don't think
I
that's.
prefer to be wrong.
I don't think that's them being stupid. I think that's very much something that ArenaNet does is they rethink the way things are being done at the moment and they think about new ways to kind of approach old problems. And I think when it
I
comes to
agree. Yeah.
monetization, they've definitely been I could definitely see them think about stuff like this because that would have been a fairly revolutionary new system to monetize a game. Would it work necessarily? I'm not sure it would have, right? Like I'm not sure I would have been a big fan of it. But I absolutely can see them thinking about something like this. I think that's a very plausible thought that
Right.
they
I
would have
guess
thought about this.
I guess for
Um,
me, if I think about Guild Wars 2 in like an indefinite living world type model, what I think about is like is that being like an end of life approach for Guild Wars 2. Like
Kinda, yeah,
that's
yeah,
sending Guild Wars 2 off into the sunset gracefully. That's giving people who still want to log into the game a bone. It's not it's
yeah,
not
possible.
meaningfully expanding the game and still treating it as the most important project at ArenaNet. That's
What kind of baffles me is why would they have done an expansion at all now? Like, what's the reason? If that was their plan, why not just leave it to Icefruit Saga, which they had somewhat mapped out? Why not put all the resources they had
That
into
is the
Icefruit
key
Saga,
question, my friend. I'm right
right?
there with you.
So they
Yeah.
must still hope to get some sort of revenue out of End of Dragon, some kind of pull, some kind of. Let's just assume this is their last release, right? Their last big gasp for air, where they try to, appeal to as many players as you can, and in order to like kind of send off the game, then, and have as big as a reach to players as you can for the next
Hmm.
franchise you work on.
Hmm.
And that's what I kind of mean at the end of the day is no matter how I kind of twist this, in no scenario do I think that the game would not profit from proper advertising, marketing, and as good a release for End of Dragons as you can possibly get.
How did Heart of Thorns do compared to Path of Fire in terms of revenue? Do you happen to
Heart of
remember?
Thorns did. I think it did. I think they both did very well, but Heart of Thorns did better. I think Heart of Thorns was like the biggest spike in revenue they had since launch.
Someone posted this chart somewhere
Um,
recently. I don't remember where I saw it. But my impression was that Heart of Thorns did better, but not dramatically so. Like not more than like 10 or 20% better. And I know that
yeah,
whenever you're talking about like I'm not sure how it works in gaming, so maybe someone could tell me this, but I know like in Hollywood for big budget releases, movies costing $50 million or more. Um, Generally speaking, half a good rubric for that. I learned this from Red Letter Media, is that half the budget is marketing. And if I'm looking at Heart of Thorns with all the marketing it had, only doing 10 to 20% better than Path of Fire, that to me is a vindication that that to get the return that a Guild Wars 2 expansion can have, it doesn't need that level of marketing. And that level of marketing is like planting seeds in bad soil in a way. And
Yeah, but then you just have kind of the counter parts to that, right? Like big, very successful MMOs that spend a lot on marketing, right? Like World of Warcraft is well known for their
yep,
incredible marketing, right?
yep,
And Square Enix is doing a lot of marketing. And I'm not even talking about like massive campaigns. I'm not saying put billboards on Times Square, right? That's an ineffective marketing strategy to me, right? But just make sure that that you have a trailer like at a reasonable time that is in circulation, right? Make sure that people there are other ways to, without spending large amounts of money, like make sure your social media channels are working.
yeah,
Make sure that and they already have this, by the way. Make sure that there are YouTube ads for other people who play in the MMO genre. You can control that stuff,
hmm
right? You can make sure that people who play MMOs get your ads.
hmm
Um, and they're already doing it, but they're not doing it for End of Dragons. They're doing it for Living World Season 2 at the moment, right?
yeah,
Which means nothing to a player outside of Guild Wars. If you're not
yeah,
only already familiar with the franchise, Living World Season 2 coming back is a meaningless sentence.
yeah.
So right now,
Yeah, I agree.
if they wanted to launch in November, right now there should already be a trailer out there. There should already be trailer footage. There should be streams of them where they announce that they're gonna have, I don't know, the new monk specialization and what it's gonna look like. There should be like
I want my
gameplay
healing warrior
footage.
spec. Give me my healing
Yeah,
warrior spec.
that shit should
I
be out
want
there,
it.
and that's not incredible, like it's huge marketing expense kind
Yeah,
of material.
like Heart
That's
of
basic
Thorns.
information, right? Yeah, that's
I
at the end of
love
the
the
day,
way they
that's all
did
I'm
it
asking
with
for,
the
really,
trickle.
right?
That so fed the content community for Guild
Yeah,
Wars 2 at that
it was
time.
so good, and I don't think that was like I don't think that was like
Yeah. So I guess like
a
an interesting question would be like, because I think that the Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire expansions are really useful opposites in a lot of ways. How they were
yeah,
marketed, what was in them, what was the plan, what was the content cadence around it, and I
yeah,
guess like I think what we can hope from End of Dragons is that it kind of takes the best from both, right? Where you get
yes,
the
yes,
really really
absolutely,
enjoyable open world of Path of Fire with the really robust enduring incentives to come back to play the
yeah,
content from
and the
Heart of
meta
Thorns.
events. Have the
And
nice
like,
collections from Part of Fire, and the one-time adventures, but also the repeatable metas and
yeah,
stuff.
and
That's
like Heart of Thorns with its major statement about having new game systems. Like expansions should
yeah,
introduce new game systems. Like they should. Like
yeah,
that's one of the main things. Also, like a very hot take from me is I think we're owed 2 elite specs per profession because we missed one in 2019. Icebrew Saga should have given us an elite spec per
ooh,
profession. We're owed two,
ooh,
man.
hot take that.
I really think
Okay,
that we
all right,
are. I feel
yeah,
gypped. I've been playing Berserker and
yeah.
Spellbreaker for the last 2 years, and I'm bored.
I've been forcing myself to play this shitty ass game, and I've without an elite spec. Do you even know what you put me through, ArenaNet?
I
But
don't know.
kind of like
Like I
going
said, it's
back
a
to
hot
like
take.
the yeah. No, I mean, you're kind of right about it, right? Like, I can see why you'd feel cheated out of it. I mean, that was
Mhm.
at a point where I already kind of didn't care anymore. So, like,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
perfectly happy to just get one, right? I think, like, kind of, coming back to realism in a way, right? Like, I think we have to be happy that we're even getting elite specs. Like, for a while, I was actually wondering if they are gonna do them.
That's
Um,
I don't know. Like that's a
but
very.
it's such an important thing for
I'm
them,
gonna
right?
push back
But
on saying that we have to be happy. Like I think maybe we
yeah, yeah, well,
that's what we should expect. That doesn't mean that should make us happy. You know,
yeah, well, Deek, would it have been a good, would it have been a good a business decision though? Hmm?
to put it in elite
Deek?
specs.
Yeah, when you know that you're gonna get another expansion that people are gonna be fine with, people are gonna be content.
Maybe not. Maybe not. I'm just talking about. So I'm talking about.
Look, I'm twisting that
No, no,
that
no.
argument against you.
That's perfect. I want you to throw back my arguments at me. That's the highest form of flattery. Um,
Oh, that
I
works in my favor.
yeah, exactly. But I don't really necessarily want to talk about elite specs, but like I think that I'm pushing back kind of hard against the basic premise of Guild Wars 2 needs advertising. Because I think that what fans are saying when they say that is that they want more people to play their game, not that they want advertising. And I think
I think
that
I think what I really want.
we need to
Yeah,
make
no,
sure
go ahead.
that we need to ask ourselves how aligned that sentiment is with the reality at ArenaNet and NCSoft. Is what do they want?
Um,
Because that's what's
I
actually
kind of
going to
want to
dictate what we
specify.
get. But go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, I don't see. I don't see any scenario where you wouldn't want more players in a way, right? Like I see your argument that you don't want to make huge budget marketing, but I'm not necessarily talking about huge budget marketing, right? Because if I think about what marketing other games do that I think is most effective, it's
Okay.
actually fairly cheap marketing. I'm talking about like stream events, Twitch events, where you advertise your game, where you
Oh
showcase the
yeah.
features,
For
trickling out the trailers that you make in house or something, right?
yeah,
The
I
the
think for
little
ArenaNet
gameplay trailers of each class.
that aspect
That's
of it is actually slightly different. I think that
I
for
think
some
that would
reason
be
Arena is kind of scared of engaging
they're
with
scared. They're scared of
the creator
overhyping. They
community.
are absolutely, but
Like
I think
I
it's
think
still so
if
important.
Arena had an Asmongold, that idea horrifies them. I think that that's the last thing that Arena wants for Guild Wars 2 for some reason, and I don't know what that reason is, but um,
Yeah, well, it's. I mean, let's just not maybe rule out the fact that they could just be wrong. Like they could just be scared of it because they're scared, even though it's
or it
would be
could just
good
be
for the
like,
game.
yeah, and
Any
so
and if an Asmongold like
this
Guild Wars 2, that
idea
would be huge, right?
this idea that an Asmongold being good for Guild Wars 2 is something that I think all people who play the game understand. But
Yeah,
for some reason, we have seen the way the game is presented and marketed be done in such a way that is just not helpful to the creators who have the chance to really spread the message about Guild Wars 2 and create an internet narrative about the game that um like World of Warcraft gets, like Final Fantasy is benefiting from right now as a good example.
mhm. But
And go ahead.
I kind of want to just like pedal back a little bit because like I don't want them
All
to
right.
buy again. I don't want them to buy Asmongold to play the game. I don't want Dota popping like huge ass coverage. I want them to just put their game on the map in a way. Like the game should have a trailer more than 1 month before it releases. Otherwise, the game is not just poorly marketed; it's not marketed at all. Almost.
Yeah, I guess
Like
I'm just
it's
backing it up to a more
incredibly.
basic problem. Like if we ask ourselves, why has there systematically not been marketing? Why do they not give content creators more lead time and ability? And why don't they platform content creators in the launcher? There are so many small things that they could do that don't
They
happen.
could, yeah.
And
Which
and like they have guild chats and stuff like that. Why aren't content creators coming on guild chat? Why isn't there cross promotion? Why is everything so segmented?
Well, we're kind of jumping into a different discussion here, kind of, because
But
like what we're talking about
it's
now
a more
is
basic question that to me informs the question of will we or won't we see marketing for End of Dragons and why? I guess
like
that's what
because
I'm
this
pointing
this
towards.
is their like interaction with content creators, and they've always been hesitant with content creators. Always, they
Hmm.
have an arena and partner program which they kind of heavily monitor on who they take, and they take
Hmm.
people who work with their philosophies and their I mean, some people they just they take in because they're too big to not tolerate, right? Um,
Ooh, like who?
but
You
like
don't have to answer that
maybe
question.
me at the well, no, I wasn't big at the time, but
Are you
like
still a partner?
I definitely think no.
Okay.
I left the partner program when I quit the game.
Okay.
Um, but I think it was the case for a little while, at least for some. Anyways, I don't want to digress too much.
A flash mob?
That's kind of like they have difficulties with content creators. Absolutely, I agree. But again, that doesn't excuse all of this, right? Like because they could still do ArenaNet hosted events. They can do a guild. They could do an announcement event like this, right? They like look at how Final Fantasy has done it. Final Fantasy did 2 of these events. Like
Okay.
first of the events was just a one night. I think it was like 6 to 8 hours event or something, where they showcased the first trailers. They had a pretty small revenue, because it wasn't a live event because of COVID. I mean, like as usually they would do like a fan fest, and they'd invite people to a venue, and they'd have a
Mm-hmm.
sitting audience. All of that wasn't there this year, right? So they did it as an online event, and it worked just fine, right? Like because of COVID, especially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like people were kind of expecting this, and it worked fine. They showed off the first trailers for the new class. They started talking about the features. They did the whole presentation about how all of the games work together that I told you about earlier, right? The red line through all of the expansion stuff. It was a super event, like, and you had your first. It wasn't the full trailer yet. It was like half of the final trailer. Um, and that was in, I think, February, right? That
Mm-hmm.
was like a couple of months ago, and that's when the first trailer for the game came out. That started circulating, right? That's when people started talking about, oh, okay, it's going to be the new class. It's going to be the Sage. The Sage is going to be the new healer in Final Fantasy. I'm so excited for a new healer.
Mm-hmm.
It just gets people talking about the game, yeah, right? Like some info about the game is out to talk about. Then they did a second event like this, which was their fan fest, which is a much bigger event for them. Usually, this is really where they actually have like it's like their own. It's like BlizzCon for them, right? Kind of
Okay.
almost. But they did it again as a live online event because of COVID. Couldn't actually have a live event, so they did it online. And there they showed the final full trailer. They had like talks with all the devs. It was like spread out over 2 days or 3 days. And they had like segments with shows of like a rock band that like played rock versions of all of the in-game soundtracks, and
Mm-hmm.
they
That's
made
cool.
like a proper cool event out of it. Like they
Uh-huh.
they had super cool memes and stuff that it got really emotional at the end when like one of the big devs announced that he had been in the hospital
Oh,
with
I
fighting
saw
cancer
that.
for the last year.
Yeah,
That was
that
a
made the
huge thing.
headlines.
Like,
Holy shit.
oh my god,
Like
yeah, Soken. Like
the main composer, right?
he's he's the composer, exactly. And it turned out that he had been battling cancer for like the
The
entirety of
last
the last year almost. And he didn't tell anybody, and
not
like
even his
because he was
coworkers, right?
so,
Or something.
yeah, he only told Yoshi P, who is his direct boss and the CEO of the company, and he told them, "I want to keep working here because otherwise I'm gonna die." Right? Like he
Yeah.
literally said, like apparently that, "Hey, I feel like if I don't have my work to do, that
That's
this
his
is gonna touch
dharma.
me even,
Hell
you
yeah.
know." And he asked them to give them somehow the opportunity to work from the hospital, and they
Mm-hmm.
set up a workstation for him at the hospital, and he worked, and he wrote some amazing soundtracks, and it made people go back and play some of the encounters that had those soundtracks, and like you can
Yes.
suddenly you notice elements in there like ticking clocks, like lyrics that you didn't really pay
Wow.
much attention to before,
Bro, that is
and
real
suddenly all of that
shit.
had like a yeah, it had crazy twists suddenly, like and like him coming back and saying, "Hey, the it's now in a fully regressive state, the cancer." And he's there at the live event, and he had like the super funny show where he played the automatona, and like he was joking around, and Yoshi P, the lead game developer, starts, he like breaks out in tears on stage talking about how happy he is because they've been good friends. That's like kind of well known. They've been good friends ever since ARR, ever since they both started working on this.
Right, right.
And he just like breaks out in tears. It gets so emotional. And he's like, "I'm just happy that my best friend is back," and like
Yeah, holy shit.
it's incredible,
That makes me
incredibly
dewy.
emotional. Yeah, I highly recommend like watching that scene. It's on YouTube. It's just a great story of passion and emotions in a video game, right? But
Yeah, of communities and stories.
and it kind of shows why people love these guys so much, right? Because they're like the community. If there's one big difference, I think between Final Fantasy and all other MMOs, is just how much the Final Fantasy community is behind their product and their devs. Like they
Yeah.
love them. Like people
Who's
love their devs, dude.
who's the game
It's
director? Is it Yoshi P? Is that the person's name?
Yoshi P. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's,
Yoshi
he,
P. Yeah, it's like the abbreviation was
he was the person who
his
headed up
name was
Realm Reborn. I mean, I remember watching the No
yeah,
Clip documentary by Danny O'Dwyer,
yeah.
which is fantastic.
He's the person that they sent in to repair Final Fantasy 14,
and
who
he stayed
pitched
on the
the idea
project. Like
of doing
that
yes,
thing where you have one vision holder who fixes it and then
yeah.
stays with it is excessively rare in
He's
game
been the
development.
game's messiah ever since. He's
I think that
been
that's
like
that's part of
the
that's got to be part of the secret sauce is continuity of vision and leadership.
I think so.
I
And
I
one thing I
I
think
look at Guild Wars
even
2 as a comparison point, and I see so much discontinuity.
yeah,
It just
yeah.
makes you think. So anyway, sorry,
And Guild
go
Wars 2
ahead.
doesn't have many of these devs that stay along all this long ride, right? At this point, most of the long-term devs are actually kind of departed through
Yeah,
layoffs, but also through people leaving.
yeah.
Um, I mean, you have people like Bobby Stein who are a rock, right? Who are an
There are
absolute
definitely some
like,
long timers still there, and some
yeah.
long timers who
But
were there up until pretty recently, like up until the layoffs, which is it's got to be
yeah,
said, 7 years into Guild Wars 2's history, or 6.5.
which really was when the whole like I think that was really when a lot of about the company changed. That's when my impression of ANET changed a lot.
Okay,
Is because of these names leaving, right? It's like kind of a lot of the devs that you really identified the game with, right? Kind of leaving,
like who?
and
What
then
names come to
feeling
mind?
like suddenly. I mean, Josh Foreman was definitely one of them. I think it was Benedict Arnold,
Hmm.
and
Although Josh hadn't even been
Matthew
working on
Medina
Guild
at the
Wars 2
time.
for a few years by that
Yeah,
point.
yeah. I mean, he's already, but he was like a dev that I knew, kind of, right? Like,
Okay.
um, I mean, Matthew Medina was out, of course. Peter
Yeah.
Freese was out for different reasons, but
Yeah.
definitely one of the devs that those were the devs that I'd follow on Twitter and know about.
Yeah, the people
Crystal
who are
Reed,
out there talking to the community, like who kind
yeah.
of made up
Well,
the
some of them
faces
not
of Guild
even
Wars 2.
talking about. Like, for example, I've always been a huge fan of Crystal Reed. Like, I
I
think
was
Crystal
just
Reed
thinking about
has,
Crystal. I loved
yeah.
hearing her
I don't
talk about
think
the
she
game. She
has,
was so like grounded and just like
yeah.
boom, so
I
on
just
it.
had like trust in her. Like, she was just a fucking professional,
Yeah.
like.
She's working at Bungie on Destiny now, isn't she?
Yeah, like so many others.
Yeah, well, I mean,
And I
Bungie's
mean,
is in Bellevue too, so it's an easy jump
yeah,
geographically. And
and I mean, you have so many other devs who made that jump without being laid off, right? Like you had who is it, Julia Nardine? Is that how you
yeah,
pronounce it? She left for Bungie.
yeah, she's working on Icebridge
Um,
Saga narrative, and then she made that change.
she was I think she was even lead. She was like
She
lead
was the
narrative
one.
designer or something.
So I learned this from Tom. I'm hoping getting this right. She was the one I think who came to do video game narrative by way of doing like puppet shows or something, like these dramatic
Okay,
puppetry things in theater, and then that was her gateway into doing video game narrative.
interesting.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, but she definitely jumped to Bungie. Like she, I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know like how much of this is like because people aren't.
Well,
I mean, it's kind of a. I guess it's kind of, at least in the West, I think it's like kind of normal that people don't stay longer than like 2 to 3
yes,
years, right?
yes, it is. It
Um,
is normal, and that's why I was saying
but
the
I think
OCP
MMO,
situation is kind of an interesting
yeah,
exception to the rule.
and it's. I mean, a lot of Guild Wars 2 has had been like that. For a lot of these devs had been there since Guild Wars 1. Bobby Stein has been there since Guild Wars 1. Peter
Hmm.
Freese had been there since Guild Wars 1. Mo, Z, Colin Johansson.
Right.
They'd all been there since it was one, right? And they all left after one after another, kind of, right? Like some of them left earlier. Colin left
Yeah.
pretty early, but then a lot of them kind of left very shortly after, Path of Fire. Like 1 or 2 years after Path of Fire is right, when a lot of people started leaving, and of course the layoffs happened, and then more people left.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, there's other people, like people who were in charge of the partner program at the time, right? Like who
Hmm.
also got laid off, and suddenly you lose your main person that I was interacting with at the time, right? Like
Oh, interesting.
because it's as an ArenaNet partner, you don't talk to devs all day, right? Like, but
No, you
you
see,
would talk to the
talk
people
to
in charge of
community
the partner
managers.
program, right?
Yeah, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, and suddenly they're gone, right? Or like one of them is gone, and somebody else is still there, right? Like, and I don't want to drop names or anything, but there's of course still a person there. But yeah, like a lot of these names just leave, and then and then what you keep hearing about, which is great that they do this, right? It's absolutely fantastic, right? But you see about all of their, people starting the business campaigns, right? Like the narrative system that Bobby is so passionate about, right? And they start bringing in new blood, and that new blood moves on without forming ties to the game, right? It doesn't feel like these are devs that care about the franchise to me. It cares to me. At this point, it seems to me like a lot of these devs are um, trying to accumulate work time
I
for their
mean, I don't. I think that
curriculum vitae.
I think that
Uh,
that's a bit of a gamer distortion of the way game development works, man. I think that that's a bit of a reduction of the truth.
maybe this is. I mean,
I
and
think
to an extent, I
on
feel
any
like
game project, like you're people who work on in game dev are lucky to work on games they're also passionate about.
okay,
I
but
think
like, look, I'm not claiming that what I'm saying is right. I'm saying that this is an impression that you get as a player, right?
right.
Okay, and I think that kind of entails the possibility that this is wrong, or like even the assumption that this is wrong, right? But this is about the impression that you get, or that I get as like a longer playing player, I guess, right?
Okay.
Um, it doesn't
So
feel like they're as invested anymore.
yeah,
Maybe like, oh, that is
let's
not about
restate
the
it.
IP as much.
Yeah, like not
Um,
not that the individual devs are more or less invested, but maybe that the studio itself is less
yes,
invested, which creates
I'm not trying to
less of
say
an
the devs aren't
incentive
invested,
for
right?
for developers
Maybe
to
that was
feel,
a
feel invested.
maybe that was a misphrasing of it. It feels like more people are. It feels like more people are less invested. Maybe it feels like that you don't have these long-term devs that you used to kind of latch onto and have your and build trust into, because that's what you do at the end of the day. You build trust over time, right? You don't just trust a new dev the first time you hear their name, right? But when I trust Bobby Stein, I fully trust him. I trust Matthew
Okay.
Medina. I would trust Crystal Reed. I trust Josh Foreman with what they do, right? And that trust has built over time. That's how trust works, I think, in general, right? You build it over time. Um, and when I see a new dev in there, I don't immediately feel that way about them, right? I don't have these ties to them. Um, and when that happens too much, that you don't see recurring faces, right? You only see new faces. That trust doesn't really get to build up as much, I think, and that's something that Final Fantasy has as an advantage over other games at the moment,
Yeah.
right? They have these Omega because, like, I think that's kind of what we want to get back to, right? So they just have it's exceptionally great in that game, right? There's all of these steps. Like you have Yoshi P, but you also have people like Koji, which is their localization guy. You have their community
Oh
manager.
yeah,
I
he was
forgot
on the
his
NoClip
name.
documentary too. I remember that.
Yeah, yeah. Most of them were on the community manager is the guy with the silver hair that's always kind of like
Right.
slightly awkward, smiling, and he was a guy
This
that
is
you
like the
just
bridge
immediately
crew of the
like. And
Enterprise. Like it seems like they do
yeah, yeah,
everything, but actually they don't.
yeah. And you have Soken. You have Soken. They talk about Soken in that documentary, right? I think Yoshi P says in the interview like. That he remembers vividly that back when he made his first big speech telling people how hard the days would be that they have ahead of them,
Hmm.
like that, like Soken was the guy who'd be like, yes, let's do it,
Oh yeah, I love
and
it.
kind of reinforce his belief basically, right? And I think
He
that's
was
kind of where their friendship
the
formed
morale
in a way.
coach.
Yeah, and it's like it was just like kind of a nice anecdote, right, for him to say, and I just remember Soken coming up to me and being like, "Let's do this. We can do this."
Yeah.
Um,
And so I really hear you about having the continuity of public facing faces and what kind of value that has. I want to add a layer onto that too, because I agree with you that like seeing that continuity and seeing some of the faces that you've associated with some of the franchise's high moments, like Josh Foreman, like Super Adventure Box, like he's one of those guys who's always going to be associated with Guild Wars, the IP, no matter
yeah,
what
yeah.
happens. He's always going to have that association because of SAB and jumping puzzles. Um,
Definitely. Whether he
but
likes it or not.
whether he likes it or not, I think is accurate. But I think he's fine with it from talking to him. But anyway,
Yeah.
talking to Tom though, Tom Abernathy, the studio narrative director, one of the things that really jumped out at
Mhm.
me was his comments about Mike O'Brien, where he talked about how important it was for him not to just be given, responsibility over the narrative, but to actually have the backing of leadership. So he told a story on the podcast, you may have heard it, um, about how
I think so. I
he
think I remember
wanted
the part you're talking about.
he wanted to in Daybreak season 4 episode 1
Hmm.
put Timey in danger, put cherished Timey in danger, which I guess at the time in the studio this was considered to be kind of a no, not allowed,
Okay.
because she's the child character, and that's not kosher. He wanted to threaten
Oh, okay.
Timey and put her in a room with Joko off screen and hear put her life in danger essentially to motivate the player. And because
I immediately know what episode you're talking about. That was
yeah.
definitely a good. I think, yeah,
And
yeah,
his contention at that time was, if we don't create serious consequences, no one will feel attached to these characters
yeah, yeah.
because it won't
I agree.
feel real. Um, and so when the episode came out, they were watching all the streamer reactions, which is apparently something they really do. Like, especially the narrative team seems like they really watch the streamer reactions to the content when it comes out.
Mm. Okay.
And they have like a whole buffet thing for expansion launches. Like Mike O'Brien has like a countdown
Oh
thing,
yeah,
or he did. And it was a cool image that Tom painted.
that's cool.
But anyway, so Daybreak comes out, and Tom's on pins and needles because even though he has the job, he knows that if he doesn't prove himself right with this narrative call that he fought for, that he might not have the job in 6 months. Like he might be out. Like because having the backing of your leadership means the world. And he was right. Like as you demonstrated, like that ended up being the right call.
Yeah,
And I guess the reason I call that out is because it's one thing to have people who you respect still making appearances in the company. It's another thing to make sure that people who can make a difference have the backing of the senior leadership. And
yeah,
that
yeah,
is always a thing that I think has been. I don't have a good sense for the senior leadership at Arena outside that story that Tom told me, which is a good one.
and we don't know anything about them nowadays, right? Like,
Right,
I mean,
it's a total
he's also talking
mystery.
about like the person who's not there anymore.
Yeah, Mike left back in, when was it?
Yeah,
At the end of 2018, before
like
the layoffs happened.
after the layoffs,
Was it after?
he was still there. Yeah, he was
Okay,
still there during the layoffs.
my memory not so good.
I think, yeah, pretty sure. Pretty sure he was. And
So
then
like
he and like three others of the founding members left.
part of what makes Yoshi P so effective, I've got to imagine, is the fact that he probably has carte blanche to run the game from the senior leadership.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's definitely. I mean, he's had a huge positive impact. But even at the time, right, the whole ARR project was a big risk for them as well, right? A huge financial risk as well.
Hmm.
Um, which, if you talk about it today, right, like when you talk about finding a publisher to publish your game, right? There's an interesting topic there, right? Where that it's unless you hit a certain like prognosticized profit margin, it's for like a big money giver like NCSoft. It's more profitable to just put the money in a bank and just do like buy like fonts with it, do like the whole money business in order to turn 1 million into 2 million at some point, right?
Right.
That has less risk to it than investing it into a game,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, so for a company like Square Enix to take a big risk like that, that's actually already kind of crazy if you think about it. Like,
Yeah, yeah, it is.
because
And
they could have just said, like, let's call it, create something new.
my
You know?
sense is that the powers that be that are in charge of Guild Wars 2 are less risk averse, slightly more business sensitive. The
Yeah, they
decision
definitely are now.
makers
They
than
definitely are
whoever's
now.
running Final Fantasy.
Because the decision makers now are clearly NCSoft, in my opinion, and that wasn't ever a feeling that you had before. Like before NCSoft took over, I never even knew how involved they were. Like every call that was made, to me seemed like it came from ANET, and they always
Yeah,
they seemed to be reasonable. They used to not be overly business driven. They used to be fairly consumer friendly. Um, and I think a lot of that changed after NCSoft. Suddenly you had something like build templates come into the game with like
oh,
triple monetization, um,
fucking build templates.
which was
What a
what did they
disaster.
call it at the time? Like, was it like people were immediately like, yeah, this wouldn't have happened at old ANET?
Especially
And, you
because
know,
the
like,
hardcore players they're already using Arc DPS. So they
oh my god, it was
literally
so much better.
literally
So much.
I actually
From
still
my
have
view,
never
I've did.
I've never engaged with the build template uh system
Well,
in,
I'm just gonna
since Arc
say that
DPS came out.
I played the game. I played the game at a very like high competitive PVE
Yeah,
level, kind of
yeah.
right. And I played a lot of builds on each class. I was a Revenant main, and I had easily 13 build templates
Uh-huh.
on
Uh-huh.
my Revenant. Some of them were like major changes, some of them were just like a few traits different, you know. But
Mm-hmm.
like I had like a list of okay, this is my boon revenant with more than 80% boon duration. This is
Mm-hmm.
my boon revenant with more than 60%, and I'd play all of them in different scenarios, right? I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't have to think about it much after I set them up. Now, dude, every fucking time, dude, I have to set them back up, man. I have to even though I think I have four on my Revenant, and they're not nearly enough. I have to change them all the time, dude, and it's so annoying. And I just think back to these times with Arc
The good old
templates, and
days.
it's oh, it was so much easier for me, man.
Me too,
But
dude.
hey, but anyway, you know what? But I kind of want to maybe because it's getting very early for me, and I have to
Uh-huh.
start thinking about getting up for work. You know, I kind of want to maybe roll back
Round it
around,
out.
and I just
All right.
because this was initially about ArenaNet's launch dates, and I kind of want to. I think we've kind of like talked a lot about the two factors that I think it kind of boils down to,
Mm-hmm.
and the one factor being competition. You know, the one factor that influences when you want to launch your game is the
Mm-hmm.
competition and other
Mm-hmm.
games launches, and based on that how much attention you'll get, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
kind of I think you kind of want a window of like about a month, I would say, where
Okay.
you're the one game that's being launched at the
That's in
moment,
the
right?
news cycle.
I
Yeah.
think that would be favorable. That would be
Mm-hmm.
maybe the best scenario you could hope
So
for at
best
the moment,
case
right? Like
for End of Dragons, that would be like around I get using an American holiday, Halloween. uh
maybe, yeah.
End of
Well,
October, a month before Endwalker.
maybe let me get actually. I mean, yeah, yeah.
Eh?
Not sure about end of October yet
It's about
because
4 years from
that's
Heart of
where New
Thorns
World comes
released.
out.
Go ahead, sorry.
But and the second factor being having enough time to lead up to it after you dropped your after you have the uh, announcement event where you potentially probably hopefully drop your trailer for it, where you drop your announcements, your infos on the thing that gets people talking. That's basically when the marketing starts to me, right? Is once the information starts circulating around. Once you know, because there will be even if people don't cover it much, right? Even if people don't consider it too important, people will cover it at some point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you just want them to cover it at a time where there's not too much other stuff going on, and you want them to cover it again when you know the game actually launches, kind of right to build
Mm-hmm.
up for it. So so those are the two factors. You want it as kind of as let's say at least 3 months after the announcement to like I think 3 months is kind of like a minimum amount of time I would say it would
So
take
July
to build some hype
27
for it.
plus 3, September 27.
Yeah. And you want to launch it when it's not launching at the same time as a major competitor,
Uh-huh.
and you also don't want to launch it during a major holiday like Christmas, right? So
Right.
when we're talking November release, that's a terrible time because of Endwalker. We're talking about October, that's a pretty terrible time because of New World, which is highly anticipated. If we're talking about December, that's not a good time because of Christmas coming up. Also, RenaNet takes a extended
They do a
break or
holiday
like that.
break.
It's like
Yeah.
yeah, every Christmas for multiple weeks, which wouldn't bode well when you just launched an expansion, um, because there are bound to be issues that need fixing after a launch.
Yeah.
So what time are we looking at really? Um, so I think that to me that leaves kind of two time windows that would be sensible, right? One would be September, early September, or very end of August, beginning of September. That leaves you, or like maybe mid September. That leaves you about a month of End of Dragons before New World comes out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that still overlaps with other games. That will overlap with Swords of Legends. That will slightly overlap with Lost Ark, I think, which is actually Lost Ark is also end of October, but I think PSO2 also. But I actually consider those two not as big a competitor as the others. I think that's kind of fine. Like,
Yeah, I would think
that's
Guild Wars
okay-ish to
would
me.
not be too worried about competing with Lost Ark or PSO, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, Lost Ark, I think they should be, but PSO not so much, maybe. But
Why
like
Lost
Lost
Ark,
Ark,
do you
definitely.
think?
I see a lot of people hyping that game right now. A lot of
Hmm.
people. I see a lot of people covering that game, streaming it, having
Isn't it
hundreds
an
of
Eastern
viewers.
pay-to-win MMO,
Uh,
though?
yeah, it is. And that's kind of makes it crazy. But like the gameplay is
Yeah,
incredibly good. Apparently,
I,
it's
I don't
seems to
know.
be.
I,
Yeah, I
at the
have
end of
my.
the
I
day,
don't
I
like it
don't
as
think that
well.
Guild Wars 2 really needs to compete against games that are pay-to-win. Like
But
in the old school sense of pay-to-win.
But let me again come back to the point where it's not really about whether people will choose to play this over that. It's about whether people hear about it, right? It's about
You're going back to the marketing again.
competing. Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
right? It's like, will people be covering Lost Ark or will they be covering Guild Wars 2? I'm pretty sure they'll be covering Lost Ark just because it's a new game,
I don't know.
and Guild Wars 2 isn't.
Maybe just because I'm not plugged into the same influencers you are, but I I'm not entirely sold on the idea that the
Maybe
arena
I'm
needs to
wrong,
worry about
okay?
Lost Ark.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I see, and again, this is what sparked all of this to me, is I've been watching so many videos about all the upcoming MMOs this year,
Hmm.
and none of them mentioned End of Dragons. None of them. They all mentioned Lost Ark. They all mentioned PSO2 even. They all mentioned Sword of Legends. They even mentioned expansions or like new, not even expansion, I think just like big patches for the Elder Scrolls, but I didn't see any End of Dragon mentions, and that's I think that's kind of I guess what shocked me in a way into even thinking about this topic more. Right? It's
That
like I felt
that
like
right now it's not even in the MMO gamer conversation. It's been written off.
yeah, it's yeah, and other games aren't nearly as important in a way, like or
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that once July 27th elapses, I think that'll change. I think it'll go into
yeah,
the conversation.
yeah,
I think
surely.
that
I
the
just hope that
arena's been
it's
coy.
I just hope that it doesn't turn into another one of those it's going to launch next month kind of things where
I
they
have
don't
a
actually give people time
I have
to
a funny feeling that's exactly what's going to happen, man. I have a funny
yeah
intuition that they're going to launch it on the
same,
anniversary.
which is terrible, which is horrible, which is fucking garbage. I'm sorry I have to say it like this, but that would be so terrible. That would just be the worst. Like and all the marketing budget aside, that's not even a budget issue, right? Like you could literally I could make a YouTube video that gets the word out once they drop a trailer in a way. Like it's not like they have to drop massive investments. They just have to do like
Well,
kind of the basics to like somewhat announce
the
what's going to come out.
the good thing about an anniversary release, let's just think about this for 1 second before you pass out on me, as I know you should
Yeah.
go. Uh, is that it gives them enough time to have a normal release cycle for a Living World release between then and the holidays. So like, let's just fantasize about them putting out End of Dragons like end of August, early September. Yep, it'll collide with New World. It's very stupid for that reason. I agree. But let's just say that gives them time to do a whole Living World release before the holidays, because we know if they release before the holidays that there's going to be a large lull before we get the first Living World release. And I think we have to assume that unless End of Dragons comes with an announcement of another game by ArenaNet, that End of Dragons comes alongside Living World Season 6. Like, we have to assume that. That's the
Yeah.
basic
I
formula
don't
of the
think
game.
they'd announce another game alongside End of Dragons. I actually
Yeah,
feel
I
like
think
that
it's
would
too
be a pretty
soon.
bad move if they did.
I think it's still at least
Be-
a
be-
couple years out.
Because that would reinforce the thought that End of Dragons is the last thing, and
Well,
once you hear about an MMORPG, and you talked about to Deroya the other day, right? And I think because I think when Deroya heard about Guild Wars 2 being announced, I think didn't
mhm.
he just like immediately quit Guild Wars 1 like this
Yeah, more. I mean,
because now everything in Guild Wars 1 became meaningless?
I think he became
And I
less
think that's
invested, but he did go through and do his Hall of Monuments. So he kept playing the game. Like, he finished it. I think his heart went out of it.
yeah,
Kind of
but
similar
like
to
he's
how he's
still
playing
like
Guild Wars 2 right now, I think, is my read.
he kind of finished it up real quick, right? But then he didn't really keep playing. A lot of people I think would probably kind of do the same
Yeah,
thing. Like
but like
That would be
let's just
bad for the
compare it to that
feeling in a
release
way.
where the big thing of Eye of the North was let's get hyped for the next game it's going to come out, and there's going to be integration
Yeah.
between this content and the next game.
And maybe they'll do that announcement, but I don't think they'll do it on the same time they announce End of Dragons. I think it would be quite stupid to announce it the same day as End of Dragons.
Yeah,
Like,
I
do it half a
mean,
year or something, you know? Like,
I think if they're going to sell a different future for the studio other than Guild Wars 2, they have to do that eventually. The question is, to me, is not will they do it? Is it now or not? I don't get the read that it's now, but I don't know. I'm making a
yeah,
bunch of guesses. Heavy
yeah,
speculation,
it's
man.
possible. But yeah, I think like the kind of end of the day, the best timings almost would be either that September or honestly, and I mean that was my big claim on Twitter today. I guess was I'd actually personally like it if they just pushed it to
You know what would
2022.
be cool? You know what would be very cool that I would love? I would love if they did prologue Living World episodes between Iceberg Saga and End of Dragons. Put End of Dragons like in the oven for another like 6 months, 6 to 9 months. Gave us like a spring 2022 release and gave us some Living World stuff leading up to it that culminated in an End of Dragons being published. Like
Yeah,
really,
yeah. I mean,
really,
it depends on how
and
much time they have to put into that content, then, right? That interim content,
I mean, there.
and how good they can make it.
I'm thinking about like Grothmar Valley. Like that was a pretty decent quality release,
Yeah,
and
yeah, that was good.
I get the sense that they kind of hurried that one out. So, like,
I had that sense on a couple other episodes as well.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
but Grothmar was definitely one of the best received ones, right? That
I'm
was
just saying,
definitely
like,
a good episode.
the
Yeah.
best case for the marketing push, I think, will be something like that, where End of
Yeah.
Dragons
Yeah.
has plenty of time to get hyped up. We get dribbles of information, and we have some more content along the way to milk that marketing before it
If
lands,
you ask
and we get
me,
a high quality 2 years of in-house development expansion.
the best, I mean, and we're talking about unrealistic at this point, I think we're starting to, this is not realistic, right? In no way do I think they would actually drop another kind of, episode worthy type amount of content before end of. I fully believe that they're
You
at
don't
this
think
point
so?
100% power in this, and we're just doing, I mean, that's all they're doing right now. It's like we're rehashing old content until then, we're filling time to keep people engaged, right?
I don't
Um,
know, man.
I don't think they
I
are
think you're
working on
right.
any
I think
content.
it's
That's
unlikely,
I
but
can see.
I think
I
it's
can't
not as
see it.
unlikely as you think. Maybe my read on it is wrong
It's
though.
maybe I'm wrong. I don't think it's really. I don't. I can't see this happening. Like it's whenever you talk about whenever you talk about what's the best thing that ANET can do, you're talking about what can they do without any effort. Um, that's always the baseline, right? Like
Well,
what is the best thing they could do without any effort? Like that's always been the baseline of any debate I've had about this game. It's like how can you engage the raid community without forcing them to make more raids almost, without forcing them to, spend a lot
yeah.
of money and resources on it.
And I
It's always
mean,
kind of the baseline.
if you're living in that world of thinking about it that way, then it's probably time to detach.
Yeah, and I mean I've been doing my best to
I
to
don't think you're
detach
that
over the
detached, man.
last 2 years.
Like listening to the way you talk
Um,
about the marketing stuff,
yeah, but
I think
that's
you're
I
still
mean
a little attached.
I'm definitely attached. Yeah, of course. I mean, like who wouldn't be? Like
Yeah.
but
I don't think marketing does the thing for games that gamers think it does. Especially not for a game that's been out for 7 years or 9 years. I can't count.
but
Just
I don't
a
know, man.
suggestion.
No, I do think it does. Like, I think I think there's a necessary baseline of marketing. Okay, and again, I'm not talking about billboards in Times Square. I'm not talking about um, TV commercials that star big names or something, right? Which, by the way, I think Shadowbringers actually did. I think they had like a TV ad with Tom Holland or something, which
That's
I've never
cool.
even heard of, right? Like,
Hmm.
I don't give a shit about this stuff. That doesn't reach me even. But I'm talking about getting the info out. I'm talking about releasing class trailers, gameplay trailers, and a cinematic trailer, right? And that's already all I'm thinking about. I don't think that is too much to ask. I think the absence of that is actually terrible. I think that does play a big role. A cinematic trailer plays a huge role in marketing of a game and how
Mm-hmm.
many people are going to play it. Absolutely, and that's really all I'm hoping that they will do soon enough, I guess, and not underhype the game. I think
Okay.
that's about it. I'm starting to get really tired, man. I'm sorry. It's starting to get difficult to formulate
Yeah, we've been talking
sentences.
for our like podcast length, my friend. You should
Yes,
call it a night.
it's
This has been fun. Hey,
way
thanks for
over.
dropping on by, Roca. Let's pick this up sometime. There's
Yeah,
clearly more to
definitely.
talk
Thanks for
about.
having me, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. And I'm gonna go and pass out. I have like 2 hours to nap
Oh
before work,
shit,
so
dude. I'm sorry. Good luck.
I, no worries, dude. And have a good rest of the stream, right?
Thanks, man.
I'll see you.
Later,
Bye bye.
Roca. What do you guys think? Yeah, thanks for the company, Roca. Good lad, a good solid lad. If you haven't, check out my podcast with Roca that I did at the end of last year. Really fun discussion. Very cool guy.